Stonk, a Godzilla movie marathon where we're stomping through Godzilla's filmography. I'm Derek, and I've seen all the Godzilla movies.
And I'm Doug, and I've now seen 3 Godzilla movies.
Yay! And we are talking about the first film of the Heisei era of Godzilla. The first fully fledged continuity reboot of the series. The Return of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Also known as Gojira, also known as Godzilla, and also known as Godzilla 1985. They really were embracing the reboot, the reboot of it, just like we do nowadays with like Scream and then Scream, 2022, things like that. So they were doing that even back in 1984. This was originally released in Japan on December 15th, 1984. So this is going to be coming out 2 days after the, what is that, 40th anniversary? Yeah, 2 days after the 40th anniversary of this movie. Because this is coming out on December 13th. Oh, wait, no, I guess it would be the 39th anniversary, right? Because it's not 2024 yet. Okay. That would have been really cool if he synced it up for the 40th.
Right?
That would have been such a, wow, dang, so close. Why didn't we just hold this podcast off for a year?
For a second, I thought you were referring to like the time between 54 and this movie, and I was like, they literally say 30 years, my friend.
But that is wild that we're now length of time between the original Godzilla and like this first major reboot is a smaller length of time between this movie coming out and now. That is like by a decade. That is pretty wild.
It's very weird.
It was, however, 10 years since the preceding Godzilla movie, almost 10 years. It's 1975 was the last Godzilla movie that came out before this one. So nearly an entire decade between Godzilla movies, and which is, I think, to this day, still the biggest gap between Godzilla movies.
I wondered about that because on the Blu-ray that I have, it had like the theatrical promo. And it said like this movie 10 years in the making. And I was like, does that just mean the gap between, or was this like some sort of wild 10-year long production?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like both kind of, but mostly it's referring to the gap because Godzilla had been retired. So we will talk about that. This movie was directed by Koji Hashimoto. It was produced and co-created as usual by Tomoyuki Tanaka, who is still working on it. The screenplay was by Hidechi Nagahara, special effects by Teruyoshi Tanaka, score by Reijiro Karuko. We will, some of those, most of those names I think are going to be unfamiliar like to us for the podcast, but some of them I will talk about because there is plenty of history within the scope of Godzilla as we sort of dig into the production of this one, which the production of it is going to be really interesting. And in fact, this is an interesting one for the podcast because this is the first episode now where we've done sort of a jump where we've gone out of order, right? So this experience has to be a little bit weird for you potentially.
Kind of.
What? Yeah. What are your overall thoughts going into this?
It's interesting because as you open this, you said it's the first sort of like rebooted continuity. And so I expected a sequel for sure. And this is definitely technically a sequel, but I kept waiting for there to be like more connective tissue. And once I realized there wasn't going to be much more than them just sort of like officially declaring it a continuity or like a continuation, it really like just kind of felt like a new movie. You know, it didn't really feel like I needed to remember that much or like, you know, find the connections necessarily. So it was weird at first only because there's that huge gap. But then once I was into it 15, 20 minutes or so, it just was like watching another movie.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I feel like you're approaching it with probably what the context that maybe a lot of people in 1984 were approaching it with, right? Where it's like, there have been 10 years since there's been a Godzilla movie. And if you weren't someone that was, you know, was already in it or was like, you know, watching, I mean, like, it's not like you could just buy the tapes for Godzilla, you know, at this point. So if you weren't going to the multiplex to see the rerunning the movies there, like you could theoretically be someone who just never saw a Godzilla movie and only knows about it vaguely, you know, so going into this movie, just like treating it in the way that I think one of the things that it was intended to be, being kind of like potentially a new audience being brought in with this movie. And I do think that it is an odd movie in that regard because it's like both reviving a long-term franchise. It's trying to return it to its roots in a way, but it's also trying to be for a new generation as well. And I do think you end up seeing that in this movie that like in a lot of ways also just kind of feels like a remake of the original Godzilla, more than it is a sequel. I think because they want to acknowledge the history of it, but they don't want to make too many ties to it because they want this to be very accessible to new viewers.
Yeah, it's interesting. It could very much exist like totally in a vacuum from any other Godzilla movie, except that it's sort of bookended by like very explicit acknowledgement of its history, which is cool. Like I have no complaints about that, but it is interesting that it's kind of this sandwich of like history. Here's our new story. History.
yeah it's fun. I have a lot of love for this movie, which I do think is like, it has flaws. It's probably like in my grand ranking of Godzilla movies, it's just somewhere in the middle. I think it's like, it's I don't want to say middle of the road, that's kind of unfair, but like narratively I feel like it kind of is. What the love that I have for it and what I find most fascinating is just really more the meta of it and the sort of what they were trying to do special effects wise that like sometimes doesn't pay off, but like knowing that again, the meta of it, knowing the weird space that they were in of being like, this is the first time in a long time that we can do Godzilla with a big budget, and we're trying to like modernize it, in a way that it hadn't been in a while, trying to make this be a serious science fiction movie that people can take seriously. What sort of innovations can we do in the same way that the original Godzilla movie innovated and created an entirely new medium, essentially, with suitmation and tokusatsu, right? And the things that they are sort of trying to attempt to do in this movie, whether they work or not, the attempts are so interesting. Like what they think it could potentially be the next movement in filmmaking,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me because, the fact that we're talking about this and talking about each movie the way that we are, I think guarantees that this wouldn't be the only takeaway I have. But if I were just watching this movie, if I were doing my own sort of marathon without any sort of academic pursuit in mind, right?
Yeah.
I do think my immediate takeaway from this would be the sort of tracking of like, oh, that special effect was really cool. Oh, but that one really kind of flopped. But they're taking big swings, and that one is actually kind of a surprise. Like, I do think a lot of what they're doing special effects wise was surprising in a good way, even when it didn't necessarily land. That stuff was all very front and center to me, having only seen a few Godzilla movies.
It definitely feels like a movie where I think the innovations that they're trying to do kind of are more at the forefront than the actual narrative of the movie in a way that I
think so.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense for what they're, it being 1984, and this is like Star Wars has come out in the intermediary between the last Godzilla movie and this, right? Like there's been in Hollywood, I think it's a weird spot because Hollywood at this point in time has kind of surpassed Japan in terms of like movie special effects, like stuff that used to be that Japan had its pulse on with big monsters. Suddenly you're getting Star Wars, you're getting Terminator this very year. America's done like The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Alien, and Aliens comes out a couple of years after this. Like we're in this sort of renaissance of practical special effects that America is doing, and Japan kind of has to like catch up.
And you can see it. Like you can see, I mean, I don't know I guess 10 years is a big enough gap that I think I can assume that plenty of the things they do here that might have been affected by American special effects have never appeared in the franchise before.
Oh,
like there's just certain practical things, even not even just like their computer effects or whatever, but like certain practical things where I'm like, fascinating, this isn't a Godzilla movie. This reminds me of this horror movie or this sci-fi movie or that, like it's this weird sort of like mashup of effects I expected and effects I never would have guessed to see in a Godzilla movie,
Yeah, no, it definitely
more liquid than I expected.
There's a lot of liquid. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of wet stuff in the Heisei era, and that's the thing that I really love about it. Actually, a lot of wet, a lot of wetsuits and a lot of slime, and a lot of water. Yeah, it is interesting because I think the context for this movie, and it's something that like I know you're aware of, but you don't really have going into it podcast wise, is like there is this sort of baggage of like the span of Godzilla movies for like about basically like 2 decades where it just got progressively like, weirder and sillier and more kid friendly and like in a lot of ways cheaper as well, and so it's cool that you get to kind of watch it, like what they're trying to do, tying it back to the original. But I think you also sort of, it's also a little bit reflected on screen here, where it's like, it's not the pendulum swinging to being like dark and gritty, but it also kind of is a little bit, where it's like,
in some ways,
yeah, like we're not your grandma's Godzilla, like we're cool and dark, and
but simultaneously nowhere near as dark as the first original Godzilla movie.
Right.
Like, it's interesting. It's almost, you and I tend to use the word edgy in like not a very positive way, so I'm hesitant to use it, but I do feel like this movie comes closer to like edgy darkness than it does like actual thematic darkness. Like that
I agree.
This movie, I think, is probably, had I not been otherwise aware of some of the things that the Godzilla franchise touches upon, I think this movie is the Godzilla movie I would have expected if somebody said, describe a Godzilla movie. Whereas
Makes
the
sense.
original one, I think, is very surprising to a lot of people because it is not this movie we just watched.
I think that makes, I think that's very insightful. Some background on this. I think what's so funny, like Tanaka, like, you know, the kind of granddaddy Godzilla, the dude was never like let Godzilla go. And it's so funny. Godzilla was chosen to be retired because there was kind of this lull in like, you know, towards the mid 70s, and with kaiju and like tokusatsu film in general, like it was just not pulling in the numbers and audiences that it used to. And, you know, I think you can attribute that to plenty of factors. We can probably talk about it as we eventually get to those movies on the podcast, but like, it like anything, audiences just fall out of love with the genre, you know. How many times do you hear about superhero fatigue now, right? There was just kaiju fatigue in the late 70s. So they retired Godzilla, but Tanaka was sort of like, okay, but what if we didn't though? And so like literally as soon as that decision was made, he was constantly like, the gears were constantly turning about like, so how are we going to have this big revival of Godzilla now that we've said we retired him? There were like a bunch of story pitches that were always being thrown out. I think that we honestly could do an entire bonus episode just about some of the Godzilla movies that never happened. Cause there's so many of them, like broken down in multiple episodes. I went to a really good Dragon Con panel, last summer, and it was so well researched and still didn't get into like all of the potential ones. And some of these are fucking weird. During this period, there's like one that was like shopped around called Godzilla versus the Devil. I don't know. There was an American pitch with like stop motion and 3D, of course. Yeah. So like there's plenty of things that I think we can talk about, but I guess the thing to know is that there was never not a desire to bring back Godzilla somehow. The question was just how and when, and how are you going to convince Toho to let this happen, right? And I think like Tanaka had become president of Toho during this time, so like eventually he'll be able to get his way, but it's still a matter of acquiring funding and everything.
Oh, sure.
The idea that became this movie was directly from Tanaka himself. I think it was very much inspired by the 3 Mile Island accident that happened in Pennsylvania in 1979. Which that if you don't know, it's like the worst accident in nuclear power plant history in the United States.
Okay.
It was a partial meltdown, resulted in a bunch of radioactive materials to be released into the environment, and did a ton of damage, hurt a lot of people. It was very bad.
So cool. Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, oh, yet another instance of nuclear anything just hurting people, and maybe we shouldn't have this in the world, actually. So I think that continued getting the gears turning. And there's this really good video. I'll talk a little bit about the special effects director, Teruyushi Nakano, because there's interesting things about him, but there's a video interview with him that was from the 30th anniversary of this movie. And one of the things that he said with working on it was the reason they were like, let's go back to this sort of nuclear message for these movies that we'd sort of lost in the 70s. He said the problem was Japanese society was gradually forgetting about these nuclear disasters. They were forgetting how painful it had been. Everyone in Japan knew how scary nuclear weapons were when the original movie was made, but it wasn't like that by the 1980s. So in those meetings, we decided to remind all those people out there who had forgotten, which is pretty brutal.
Wow. That is somebody like taking the responsibility of art extremely seriously. You know what I mean? Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you know, so many quotes from like Ishiro Honda were kind of the same way too, right? It's just sort of like, we want nuclear weapons to be eliminated from the planet, and maybe our movies can make that happen.
Well,
you know,
if you think about it, you know, somebody who endured that and then lives several decades after, sort of has to reckon with the idea that people don't care as much as you did when it happened. You know, I feel like we see this with things like the way that people view like the AIDS crisis and all of that sort of stuff. Like, people have to be reminded of like how serious and horrible that was, because we're just getting further and further in distance and time from the event itself. So it makes sense to me, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, that coupled with like the 3 Mile Island event happening in another country. So it's not like the average person in Japan is probably going to be paying much attention to it. But like, if you hear about that, it's a sort of like, see, it's still happening. That coupled with the Cold War being a thing, which obviously you called it. It's very much present in this movie. But I do think a factor of the Cold War was that, like, because it was something that went on for so long and wasn't like a war in the traditional sense. So like, if you're a civilian, like, you can just be totally tapped out on that being a threat. It's the weird dichotomy of like, there's some people who were alive during certain periods of the Cold War where it's just sort of like, it's terrifying that we can die by a nuclear missile at any time. But I do feel like probably by 1984, you know, I imagine if you're just a regular person, it's just sort of like, it's the way that we've talked about before, I think on, you know, one of our earlier episodes, where it's just like, we know that there's always going to be a threat of like nuclear war. Like, what can you do about it? And you always just stop thinking about it and take it less seriously because of that, you know?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. It's that distance. It's being so far removed from it that you never experience that fear firsthand. And there's also the totally understandable, like, sort of coping mechanism of distancing yourself, because like, being fearful every single day that some sort of nuclear holocaust might happen is exhausting, you know? Like, I can understand people being frustrated that somebody might finally sort of check out of that anxiety, but like, I get it. You know?
Yeah. Well, Godzilla's here to make you think about it, and
you
never
better think
forget
about it. It could happen still. More now than ever, you know?
Well, so Tanaka himself wrote a script treatment for a movie titled The Resurrection of Godzilla in 1980. Ooh. This is the only time he ever has written his own script treatment. That's how committed he was to bringing Godzilla back. The dude fucking loves Godzilla. And it got rewritten again in 83 with Hidechi Nagahara, who ends up, you know, refining the script and gets the screenplay credit for this movie as well. And that's the script that sort of took off and became what it is now. It was always obviously going to be something that it's sort of like Godzilla is back, but in the 80s, and it's the Cold War, and you know, nuclear power plants are a thing now. But the main difference in those two scripts was that he does fight another kaiju in that. It wasn't just going to be a solo Godzilla movie. It was a shape-shifting kaiju named Bagan, and that is one that, if you're like, that is one in like the Godzilla fan communities is like notorious, because that kaiju has popped up in so many scripts. Like, they've constantly tried to get him into a movie.
It's the kaiju that never was.
Yeah. And I think like he is in one video game, like, and he's in supplemental materials, but it's sort of like the cryptid kaiju, because it's sort of like, we know you could exist, but like, where are you?
Yeah.
If you've ever seen art of like sort of like a demon devil looking kaiju, that's probably Bagan.
Okay.
You know, but
is it worth looking up, or should I avoid until future?
We can maybe even, I think if we ever do a bonus on like the stuff, the Godzilla stuff that ever was, that would be a big part of it, because he pops up in multiple movies. So. Okay. Yeah. It's, you know, and it's not that big of a deal. I think it's just interesting that there almost was Godzilla fighting another kaiju. Yeah. Because he had fought kaiju in like every movie in the 70s, you know? So it makes sense that would still be in their head, but it's just sort of like, no, wait, hold on. The whole point of this is to return him to his roots. How more Godzilla roots can you get than just Godzilla with no other monster in it, you know? Yeah. I guess there technically is kind of another monster in this movie, but we can talk about that. I do think that this movie, the other thing this movie is interesting, another way this movie is interesting is that it's sort of this transition period between the Showa and Heisei eras. Like, technically this comes out during the Showa era, because the Showa era doesn't actually end until 89, but because it's like in the same continuity as every movie that comes out in the actual Heisei era of Japan, they just loop it in with the Heisei era, right? But I think it's also sort of reflected in this movie as well, because this movie is very different from every other movie that comes after it. You know, and you'll learn how when we watch them, but I do feel like once you see the other movies that come after this in the Heisei era, it becomes very clear that this is kind of like the old guard kind of passing the torch onto the new guard, because there's this combination of people who have both worked on Godzilla movies for a long time and some who've never worked on it before. The writer Hideshi Nagahara had never worked on a Godzilla movie and in fact never goes on to work on another Godzilla movie after this. Ooh. He just helped refine the scripts and worked on some of the pitches that never got made, but this is the only one he does. And Majiro Karuko is the composer. He also does the score for this movie, but never does a score for a Godzilla movie ever again. Okay. They did try to get Akira Ifukube back. He declined to score it, I think, because he was busy teaching composition at the Tokyo College of Music. So he finally got his opportunity to do something other than film composition for a second. Don't worry, they entice him back for future movies, so you'll still see him again. On the other end of the spectrum, though, Koji Hashimoto, he's the director. He had originally worked as an assistant director on a ton of Godzilla films throughout the Showa era. So like he has plenty of experience working with other directors. Okay. This is the only Godzilla movie he ever fully directed. And actually he only ever fully solo directed 2 movies, including this one. The other one being the sci-fi film called Sayonara Jupiter that had come out earlier this year. So Sayonara Jupiter, Bye Bye Jupiter, depending on how you're translating it. I've never seen that movie, so I don't know anything about it, but 2 movies came out this year and then he never directed, never got a director credit ever again. They did try to get Ishiro Honda back for this, actually, to direct this. Yeah. And it would have been really cool. And he actually we will run into him again. He directs other movies throughout the Showa era, interestingly, but he declined. The stuff that I read is that he kind of cited it either, depending on who you're talking to, or maybe for both reasons. He didn't really like the direction of where the series went in the 70s. And so it was sort of like, I'm not really sure if this is going to be my vibe or not. So I'd rather just stay out of it. And also, Eiji Tsuburaya, who we worked with very closely throughout the Showa era doing the special effects. He had died in, I think, 1970. And I think it felt weird for Honda to be like, I don't want to make my big return without my guy at this point. Like it just feels weird. So totally understandable and makes sense. Speaking of special effects, Terayushi Nakano, I referenced him before because he does a really good interview that I will cite a bit when we talk about Godzilla's suit. But he had been working in Godzilla special effects since as early as the 3rd film in the franchise ever, back in the 60s. So he had been working in some capacity since then. He became special effects director in 1969 with All Monsters Attack, and then stayed special effects director throughout the rest of it. He basically was the direct successor to Tsuburaya. And this ends up being the last movie he worked on only because he decides to retire after this. So this kind of gets to be his swan song, which feels the most like passing of the torch to me, because it's like he's, a big guy from the Showa era, finally gets to make his last movie, but on like a much bigger budget than he ever got to work with. And then, then gets to, go retire after that. So it kind of makes sense. And I think that's pretty cool that they at least got him back for one last movie before he finishes out his career.
Especially this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to talk about this Godzilla suit?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So the name of this Godzilla suit, I love it. 84 Goji is the fan name for it. Okay. Super simple. Makes me very happy. Kenpachiro Satsuma is the suit actor for it. He had previously played other kaiju in the Showa era. He plays Hedorah and Gigan, so you will meet them at some point, Doug. But that's really all he, playing other kaiju is all he had done in those Godzilla films. This is the first time he gets to play Godzilla himself, and he plays Godzilla throughout the entire Heisei era.
Whoa. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. It was they intentionally crafted this suit to closely resemble the original Godzilla suit comparatively. Like if you know, again, we will go through the stuff in the 60s and 70s, but the Godzilla suit evolves and he stops looking like the original Godzilla. And this one is sort of like, let's have a return to form. And, we're doing the reboot, it right down to like the number of toes he has. He has 4 toes and ears, which are things that like Godzilla had lost over time. Okay. I think literally Godzilla Raids Again was the last time he has 4 toes and ears. So like right down to the details, you know. Like the fangs are something that he had sort of lost over time that he gets back. The dorsal fins are made large again. The tail's made long again.
This is all wild because Doug was none the wiser. You know what I mean?
But that's what I'm saying. It's sort of so fun you going from those movies to this, because for you, it's like, oh, this is just the 1984 version of the two suits that I've seen, basically.
Yeah.
It's so funny because it's like, this is another thing, because you're used to like these old suits being like 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, again, 242 pounds. But that is a change because throughout the whole Showa era, it had gone down to like 88 pounds. So they like add the weight back on, essentially. What do you think of this Godzilla suit?
I like it. It's because it's very similar to the two I've seen. I had to sort of try to figure out, and I didn't dig too deeply into it, but figure out like what stood out about it specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I love the silhouette of this suit. This suit looks amazing, especially from a distance. It is like such a wonderful Godzilla shape. Like, also you said like a return to the long tail. This tail felt especially long.
Oh yeah,
it's much longer than the first two.
I mean, it's longer. I think. Yeah. No, you're right. It's longer. I think it's more like it had gotten even shorter in the other, the Showa era movies. This is sort of like he should have a long tail, and then they make it hella long.
It's like the length of his body at least. Like it's huge, which I think is very, very cool. I am still getting used to, because of the few Godzilla movies I had seen prior to this. I'm still getting used to what I believe are probably standard Godzilla eyes that to me weren't standard Godzilla eyes. Correct me if I'm wrong about this. But because I had seen like 99 and Shin and 2014, like I've never seen, I hadn't really seen like these like much larger eyes. Sometimes like almost cartoonish, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but like they're like big, bright, round, like colorful, detailed eyes, from some angles they look so cool, and when they do puppet stuff with them, I'm always like delighted. But then there are some angles where I'm like, ooh, that doesn't look great. Like either they're like weirdly wall-eyed, or like it's just like a weird angle where it's like not hitting quite right. So I'm still getting kind of used to the eyes. That's not, I don't think, unique to this suit, but it's the only thing that ever kind of like caught me off guard sometimes. Most of the time, except for a couple things, because I've watched enough things with rubber suits that I like noticed a couple of the practical things happening, as far as like where the suit actor saw through. But you can forgive those things. The eyes were the only thing where I was like, sometimes I really like these, sometimes I don't really like these, but everything else I was very into.
I think we're also trying to figure out the eyes.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, because the reason that it looks wall-eyed at certain points is because they actually they were trying to figure out mechanisms to make the eyes of the suit move more realistically, but they had problems with it, so there would be points when the eyes would just look wall-eyed,
I feel
in the
a little
wrong direction,
better.
and they just couldn't do anything with that.
I was like
that wasn't intentional.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better, because I was like a little nervous to critique the eyes here. Because this is a really great suit, and I feel like, this is probably a more standard eye shape and size to Godzilla than I was used to prior to this.
Yeah.
So I was like, ooh, this is probably classic, and I'm going to come in and critique it.
No. Well, and actually the slanted, this kind of the slantedness where it's sort of like it slants down and you don't see like the whites of the top of his eyes. It's like the eyelid kind of cuts off half of the iris. Like that is something that Nakano was very intentional about. And his idea was that like he wanted a Godzilla that like looked more sorrowful than it did menacing, even if it was still looking kind of menacing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like so the eyes were he felt like it's kind of part of that he wanted sorrow in his eyes and not obviously scary, even if it's still a little menacing. He also like in that video I watched is so funny because he talks a lot about his shoulders too.
Okay.
He was like, I wanted the shoulders to be sloped. He says something where I don't think I have the quote in front of me, but at one point he says something sort of like if he walked like with like very strong straight shoulders, he would like look too confident, and if it sloped more, that is inherently kind of like a more sorrowful look.
Yeah, for sure.
Like even you said like even if I wanted it to be like you see sorrow even if you're just looking at his back just because of the way he's walking.
Yeah,
and I do think that kind of comes through.
That makes sense. Yeah, I do think I do think even though that sort of sorrow and almost melancholy on the part of Godzilla in this movie comes through tonally, through like the events and certainly through the music, and through people's reactions to Godzilla and stuff like that, I feel like the suit itself shone more for me when he did kind of look angry or did kind of look more aggressive.
I agree.
So it's interesting that the physical stuff was, I appreciate that exact thought about the shoulders, because I agree with that. I think that's a really smart choice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like the primary thing that conveyed that emotion to me.
I agree. I agree with you. I think as part of the attempt for what they're doing, because I think it really is sort of like we're working with a bigger budget now, and previous Godzilla suits were made to just be flexible so you can jump around and dance and stuff, and now we want something that feels a little bit more realistic and like weightier, and we want to convey emotion through the suit. And I think that is sort of a thing where they just have to play around with it and figure it out, and other movies are going to do it better than this one did, I feel like. But
elements of emoting, but there are also times and certain shots where I'm like, ooh, that face looks completely dead. There's nothing happening on this face. And then other times where the face is doing like the absolute most in like a fun way. Like, I don't know if I necessarily, I'm undecided on whether I like the sort of like almost canine like snarl of the lips of Godzilla, but I was fascinated by it. I thought it was so cool.
Well, that's the other sort of innovation that they were trying to do with this movie that like didn't really quite work out, and you're not going to really see in other Godzilla movies.
I think I'm okay with that. As fascinating as it was,
it's cool. It is a Cybot that they built in addition. They call it the Cybot that they built in addition to the suit.
Okay,
that really is an animatronic robot that's 16 feet tall. I think I've posted the skeleton of it. I don't know if you've clocked.
I was wondering because you just reposted that, and I was like, "Is this significant?"
Yes, that is like the skeleton of the Cybot that they built. Nakano was like, I wanted to build an 80-meter Cybot, but obviously that wasn't really going to happen.
I don't think so.
But the idea was sort of like we can our innovation, something that animatronics and puppet work. There was a lot of that happening in Hollywood, so they wanted to do their version of that with Godzilla. And I think that they struggled with it a bit. They made something cool, but it just didn't really work, I think, as extensively as they wanted to. So it ended up really just being used for like close-ups more than anything else.
Yeah,
that is the thing that like you can see the sort of eyelids, a lot more motion in the eyelids when he blinks. That's one where he's snarling, and like actually peels the lips back like more like a real animal would. That's fully the Cybot, like the cheeks twitching and the nose moving, like that's all Cybot stuff. And it is cool when you compare the two. They do look pretty different, like just like with the hand puppet in the original Godzilla. It's sort of like, ooh, that's the robot, oop, that's the guy in the suit. Those are two different heads.
I didn't find it particularly distracting though in this case. Like certainly not like Raids. It was like so distracting. So like if I'm ranking them, I honestly would say that Returns was the least distracting, and then the original I feel like was only mildly more so, and then Raids is like massive gap, and that was so distracting. I have a question though. At the very end of the movie, is that a third? Is there more than just two faces, or what was at the very end in the volcano when Godzilla is like screaming?
That was the Cybot, I believe.
That's the Cybot?
The close-up? Yeah, I think that was the Cybot. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to go back because maybe it was just like an angle that they hadn't used at any other part of the movie, but like for some reason that really struck me, and I was like, whoa, this looks like different than anything we've seen to this point. But Godzilla is like pretty mellow in this movie. So to have him actually screaming at the end, maybe it's just that,
I think that could be part of it. Like he literally didn't open his mouth that wide until what he's actually screaming falling into a volcano, which makes it very effective, I think, because it's very striking. But the Cybot, it's so fucking like, that's one of the things I love about this movie, because it's like it doesn't ultimately really work out, and I think they probably didn't get their money's worth out of it just for some close-ups, but I love that they tried, because it is sort of like, should this be the next innovation that we make? Should we try to build a literal giant robot Godzilla and have that be our guy? And it's like, maybe not, but like I love that they tried, because that's what makes a lot of these movies fun, is the experimentation with special effects.
I think I'm Yeah, I'm happy they took the swing. I think
Yeah.
I'm glad that they ultimately decided to move away from it. Just because I do think not even just visually or like physically visually can you tell the difference between the two, but because one of them is emoting so much and the other one's not emoting at all, like that to me is the bigger disparity than the actual like physical differences, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And I also think like, we don't really get to see it in this movie because we're only seeing the Cybot in close-ups, but like, I think that there is something that a suit actor can lend to movement that would be incredibly hard to mimic with an animatronic. As much as I fucking love animatronics, I think it would be really hard to convey stuff through the robot than a person in a suit could.
Well, and now I think especially 40 years ago, probably, you know what I mean? Like, I think now maybe you could do some stuff, but it wouldn't be exactly the same way they did it. It would probably be so much more complicated, and it would probably be multiple operators plus a suit actor, almost choreographing what they're doing.
Yeah. Speaking of movement, one of the other things that Nakano said that I thought was really cool, because I had never heard any of the other special effects people or directors or anything talk like this. He was specifically informing, the actor and everyone involved to think about the traditional Japanese style of dance called No with Godzilla's movement. And that's something that I'm not super familiar with really, but watching some videos of what No dance looks like is like it does seem like it's a lot of slow and big movements and like big gestures and almost like a low center of gravity, which totally makes sense if you're playing a big monster, right?
Yeah.
And like some of the quotes he said in the video are so interesting because he's like, I wanted the action to look like beautiful and not human. And he's like, I didn't want people to look at it and think there's someone inside, although everyone obviously knows there is, which is funny.
Sure.
But then he also said humans actually have the ugliest walk in the animal kingdom, always struggling around, particularly young people now. It looks like they lost their knees. So he specifically was like looking to dance and how animals move to make it feel different than just Godzilla just walking like a person.
It looks like they've lost their knees.
I don't really know either. I think he's referring to people shuffling, maybe.
I was
like
just going to say shuffling
I think
around as opposed to like being sort of nimble on your ankles and knees, I guess.
Yeah. That's
really funny.
I thought that was interesting. I mean, like, I can't say that in this movie that I felt like Godzilla's movement felt any like particularly special, but I think that point of direction is really interesting to think about because I imagine that's something that maybe other actors also think about is like that style of dance when they're playing kaiju.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's the kind of thing, like sometimes a direction is successful if it doesn't stand out to you, So I wonder if it's the kind of thing where like, maybe I'm taking the movement for granted because it is working. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
but I can't say that any of Godzilla's movement really stands out to me from this movie because there's not that much locomotion that we're seeing on his part. Like a lot of the coolest stuff I remember is actually when he's pretty static.
Yeah, he kind of just passes out a couple of times and he walks.
Yeah.
And I think like you said, he's very mellow in this movie, like kind of uncharacteristically almost. There's almost like not a lot of opportunities to see movement.
I don't know, at least from what I've seen, if it is that uncharacteristic, because the only things I've seen to this point are the original one, the fucked up movement of raids, which is an accident, so you kind of have to write it off.
Yeah.
And then this is sort of this like melancholic movement that I think the original Godzilla absolutely had.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Your context is different from mine. So yeah, I love that. I love that about this podcast.
Yeah.
There's just one more. This is actually backtracking a little bit, but I wanted to get this quote in because it's so funny from Nakano. The things that he says are so bizarre. But when he was talking about like just designing Godzilla and like talking about the shoulders and everything, which we complimented and agree with.
Yeah.
He said there were many other monsters, but they were never better than Godzilla because of his shoulders.
Okay. A shoulder man.
He's a shoulder man.
We can appreciate it.
What a guy. What an interesting guy.
It is interesting. Godzilla. I know in the introductory episode, you said that Godzilla is often not really gendered, is often male coded, or explicitly gendered male by, people. But it is interesting. I mean, Godzilla's physical form is actually, if you are comparing it to humans and there is a human in that suit, actually like embodies a lot of both masculine and feminine shapes from a human's perspective. And the fact that this guy is talking so much specifically about the shoulders are one of those things that people really obsess over when it comes to like masculine, feminine, and like androgynous silhouettes. It's all shoulders and hips, and Godzilla's got some shoulders and hips. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. He got them thick thighs and childbearing hips, man. So yeah, that's such a good point.
It is interesting that so much of that focus is on those shoulders. I don't know. Yeah. Something about that feels notable, and I'll be curious to see other suits and other Godzilla silhouettes to see how that stuff might change or not.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that observation. My last thing about special effects, Nakano did kind of get like his wish a little bit with wanting like a 80-meter Godzilla robot. In a way, he did get to build his foot. There's a foot that you see a couple times in this movie is a life-size crane operated model of Godzilla's foot that they use for close-ups of his foot stomping on people.
Wait, that's fascinating, because I can think of certain foot moments from this movie, but I feel like I'm remembering like special effect composition foot moments. So that's fascinating. Now I'm going to be really intrigued to go back and see if I can find that foot.
Yeah, you're looking for those. You're a feet guy now.
Going back for the feet. Those 4 toes, baby.
Yeah. It's so funny the things that they chose to try to do in this movie, including like making a giant foot. Like,
oh, that's so interesting to me.
Because it's like that's a thing where it's just sort of like I feel like that had been nailed in 1954. Like that was not I don't feel like that's a thing that like as much as I love practical stuff, I feel like that's not a thing that ever needed to be practical. I feel like that superimposing Godzilla's foot on a crowd of people running, that's been nailed perfectly fine.
I think some of the most impressive special effects in those first 2 movies are those composition shots. They often leave me in awe of how smooth and well done they are pulled off. I mean, honestly, better than like some of the composition shots in this. Probably because they're just done differently,
and then being in color makes it harder too.
Totally.
Yeah,
I have a question since we're talking about size of Godzilla.
Okay.
I this will probably be more of a conversation as I have seen more suits and movies and stuff. But I was wondering, because you get a really, really strong sense of scale for this Godzilla because you get to see it against skyscrapers, and I was literally able to pause and count like how many stories tall this Godzilla was. In comparison to the first 2, is this meant to be the same size as those?
No, or they increased the size intentionally. The original Godzilla is about 50 meters high, and I think he stays about that height throughout the Showa era, I believe.
Oh, so this was their first sort of like significant increase in size.
Yeah, because I think that was part of like the reboot of it all, right? Like, this is Godzilla in the modern day. We're going to embrace that skyscrapers are taller than they ever have been. So we make Godzilla bigger. And it's funny because he still is shorter than some of the skyscrapers. Like he's not towering over everything. Yeah. And
he
Godzilla
can hide behind some of those skyscrapers, which I noted. I was like, that's interesting. Depending on your vantage point, you could like not actually see what was going on.
It's so fun. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love when Godzilla's a small boy, personally. I think it's really fun. I think Godzilla -1 has a lot of fun with that in that movie, too.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Because
he's a small boy.
Without having to say that, that's so funny because I haven't seen -1 at this point, but like just from the little bits I've seen, he feels really big. Not necessarily, I don't have a scale for him, but like something about him feels really large. But Godzilla, without necessarily having to get specific about when I will see this or not, Godzilla gets significantly bigger even still than 80 meters, right?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Because that's what I thought. Like when if again, one of these sort of like, if you had asked me before I was getting into any of this, like I would have guessed that he was much, much bigger sort of as a standard than what we were seeing in this one.
Yeah. He bounces around sizes throughout the history of it too.
Mhm.
It's not just like
Yeah.
scaling up always. You know, and it's always interesting like why and when they choose to drastically increase his height or, you know, bring him back down or not.
And I'm certain I've seen those like graphics that sort of just like lay out. They never meant anything to me other than like, wow, neat, Godzilla different size. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then even like that artwork that you contributed to, like it was very clear that things were scaled in a particular way and different Godzillas were different sizes. But
Yeah.
I don't know like what's the average or the standard, or if there is even one considered to be a standard.
I feel like at this point there really can't be, like, I'm sure that you could do the math and there is an average, but like, I think it has to just depend on, you know, what version you're doing, because I think there's different reasons for making him really big versus making him a lot smaller, depending on like the time period and the context and the type of story you're telling.
This will be really interesting because you said you like when he's a small boy, and my gut tells me I like when he's a really, really, really big boy. But I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen one. Well, sure. Maybe I've seen one, right? 2014, where it's pretty big.
Oh yeah, he's real big in that. He's a real big boy. I mean, I like when he's a chonkster too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like him either way. I think it's fun when he's a little small boy.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, thank you for answering that, because now that I've seen I think it was pretty clear that the first two are meant to be basically identical in size. So this was the first time that it appeared to me that maybe we were on a different scale. So a little bit of a tangent, but I'm glad.
No, I think that's why we're here. That's like the type of conversations that come out of talking about Godzilla is how big Godzilla, how big is he? So, you know, that's totally cool. That's really all I have for the background stuff. I have some like fun, you know, character actor things, but I think that could probably come up as we're talking about the movie, really. So is there a particular place that you want to start with talking about the movie?
I do want to ask one more production thing.
Oh, absolutely.
If you encountered this at all. I know that the fun thing about Godzilla movies, especially still in this era, is the practical effects, but there were notably like non-practical effects in here. And I just was wondering if there's much that anyone even talks about with some of those things, some of those like mid to sort of late 80s computer graphics.
I don't remember reading anything about people explicitly talking about that, at least not in like the books that I was reading and, you know, the ye old Wikipedia page, but
because it doesn't feel like anything, especially watching it now. But like, I particularly noticed like the globe that they sort of render, it just looks like a wire, you know, shape. But I just was interested based on when this was happening, you know?
I think by 84, it was still like cool to see it, but I think it was enough of a norm that it wasn't like doing that was a big innovation, you know?
Sure.
Like I think probably in Japanese movies, even though they weren't doing like tokusatsu movies,
I guess that's what I'm
like
curious
sci-fi
about.
and stuff like that. Like I feel like probably in like if you're watching like Sentai or like Kamen Rider that's happening in the early 80s, I think they're doing this type of kind of rotoscoped like lightning and stuff effects already. Yeah. So like I think that it just kind of is the norm, and nothing that they're doing really goes beyond like, you know, those funny like superimposed like rotoscope birds that you see flying by. Sure. You know, with all the artifacts around them. I love that. But then like that, and then like the lightning and some of the computer graphics on the computers. Like I think by this point, I don't want to say that it's easy to do, but it's not like a mind-blowing thing. If they have a big budget, which they did for this movie, that's the type of thing that you would expect them to spend it on. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, where do you want to start for this movie? Well, actually, no, I know exactly where I want where you want to start and talk about, because one of the questions I posed to you for both this and Raids Again was sort of like Godzilla's bones, right? And I think I kind of almost led you on the wrong path because you were expecting an explanation. There almost isn't one in this movie.
Okay. So one of the predictions I had was that the Cold War was going to factor in, and I think that is absolutely a ding. I get that one.
Yes, you 100% get that.
Which I think is a pretty easy prediction, but it's possible that in a weird, bizarre universe they decide not to make Godzilla about the active, ongoing nuclear conflict. I don't know why they would do that, but I'm still giving myself credit. The other thing was, you asked me how this could be another Godzilla, and I decided not to just say that they did the same thing as Raids, because Raids is an entirely different Godzilla, and tried to come up with an explanation. And I think all I could come up with was like, it must be supernatural. Let's go with supernatural. Like that has to happen at some point. So let's put our chip down here. And I don't think I necessarily am 100% right, but they do literally say this, like Godzilla is an immortal beast.
It's they're basically
so the implication here is that Godzilla was reduced to bones and was able to heal from being reduced to bones, not from anything other than he's immortal.
Yeah.
So I'm getting partial credit, I think.
I'm gonna okay. So
I don't think it's a passing grade, but it's not a 0%.
I think this is interesting. I think this is actually really interesting because they kind of you're right. They explicitly say he's like immortal, and like it's kind of more likened to like a natural disaster, or like this force of nature that has because nature is unbalanced. Now it's the time for the spiritual return of Godzilla, and that's how they presented in this movie.
Yeah.
Just like, and I think part of that is because this is sort of your almost remake as much as it is a sequel, you know? And so it's just sort of like, we're not gonna make a thing out of it. It's Godzilla, you know, Godzilla. And they're probably banking on like half the people aren't even going to remember that he died in the original movie anyway. So like, who cares?
Sure.
I'm going to, do I want to do this? You know what? Yeah. Cause I think this is going to clarify some things, because I don't want to just like set you on the wrong path with your expectations either. I'm going to give you a minor spoiler, because I think there is sort of a retcon in the Heisei series, because you're right. They don't say what Godzilla is in this.
There was something, and I wish I had made a note of it, and maybe I did, but there was something. Oh, I don't know if this is what you're going to bring up, but I want to bring it up just in case it is, to see if I picked up on what you're about to bring up. But I think at one point, and this could be semantics or this could actually be significant, I feel like at one point they explained that Godzilla was created by man, and I don't know how metaphorical that is supposed to be or how literal that is supposed to be, but in the original Godzilla, he's not created by man, he is awoken by man. They acknowledge that he and other sort of prehistoric creatures have been living sort of subterraneally, and we just awoke them and sort of activated them. But in this one, they do say that he was created by man. Is that kind of where you're going?
That's absolutely not where I was going at all, actually. Right.
And again, I don't know if that is supposed to be literal or not.
Yeah, but I think that they keep it vague on purpose, though, right?
Sure.
Like because so much of what they do with Godzilla in so many of these movies are like sort of morality tales. You know, it's just sort of like nuclear weapons is bad. Man shouldn't use nuclear weapons because this is what man creates when he uses nuclear weapons, and what he creates is this monster. Which is representative of the evils of the mistakes of man and the evils of nuclear radiation.
Well, and in that first one, our advances in weaponry and nuclear weaponry and all this sort of stuff created the problem that was waking up Godzilla, right? Like for sure. Right. So like in that sense, like created the problem, but but that line is the type of thing that I would have guessed, right? If you said like, where did Godzilla come from? It would have been like, I'm assuming it was a mistake on humankind's part, you know? Yeah.
So what I'll tell you, and I think this will kind of clarify things going forward and set expectations for just how these movies honestly kind of work, is like, they do just kind of throw out in a later movie in the Heisei era that this is just another Godzilla from the original Godzilla. Which I feel like this one is just another Godzilla. Yeah.
Whoa.
Right.
What?
And it's not like it's a reveal or anything like that either. Like, it is just sort of like, for the movie they're making, it just makes sense for them to establish, by the way, the original Godzilla in the 50s was a different one. This is a second Godzilla that showed up.
Okay. So to my knowledge, with that little bit of information, to my knowledge specifically, that's 3 separate Godzillas, right? Because you've got Bones Godzilla, you've got Raids Godzilla, and then you've got this one, if they're saying that it is like different. Okay, I mean, got it.
Obviously it's a different continuity, so technically in this universe there's only 2 Godzillas. Right. Raids Godzilla doesn't exist in this universe.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. That's right.
Yeah. So so at this point in time, there's 2 universes that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And 2 Godzillas in each universe. But I do think that's kind of a retcon, because I don't think they were making this movie to revive it, but they weren't. they weren't thinking of it in the way that obviously we think of movie series now, where it's like
Sure.
plant the seeds for the sequels. They're just sort of like, yeah, we're not going to really bother. We're not going to give you some science fiction explanation for Godzilla being back. We're just going to give you this sort of vague spiritual thing for the morality tale. And now Godzilla's here. We all know Godzilla. And like I said, it's not like it's a big reveal in those Heisei movies either. I think the thing that I think is useful to know for these movies, and I was posing those questions because I wanted that to be a conversation for the sequels, right? And I thought it'd be interesting for you to think about that, only to get like a completely unsatisfying answer of like, it's just no reason.
No,
I think it's sort of the way that these movies sort of treat this, though. It's like the Godzilla franchise often, I think, is more interested in Godzilla as an idea than it is sort of like, let's make sure our lore checks out and makes sense, and we explain exactly how they defeated Godzilla last time he's here. Sometimes it does make sense and movies will flow right into one another, but other times like this, it's just kind of like, I don't know, he's just here spiritually.
I mean, that's always been my assumption. Like,
yeah.
And so the only reason I was considering any continuity is because you asked. But no, that's been my assumption. You know what I mean?
But that's why
it's one of the things that I like about some longstanding properties. And in real time, people have maybe seen me rant about this on Twitter. But like, I love properties that are like, it's not about the continuity. It's about being able to tell a story with this idea or this monster or whatever. So like, for me, this could be an entirely splintered and fractured and totally fucked up quote continuity, and it would never bother me.
No. And I knew you would appreciate that. I think it was like, because I think those are the questions that people nowadays for movie franchises would ask.
Yep.
And so we ask them, and then you get the answer in this movie, and the answer is like, we don't give a shit about that continuity bullshit. Like, it's whatever.
He's
it's
just
like
back.
related to the
You
first
can't
one, I
kill
guess.
him,
He's
so
just
here
back.
he is.
Yeah. And
then
if
maybe
they
we find out he's not. Whatever.
Right, exactly. And I love that about a lot of the Godzilla movies.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I said in our intro episode that it's like, there's continuity in a lot of these movies, but like, you also don't have to like think too deeply about it. Like if you watch them out of order, it's not really gonna mess things up too much for you, you know?
And I'm used to that from like tokusatsu in the more like hero genre, right? Like with Kamen Rider and Sentai and even Ultraman, like stuff crosses over when they want to tell a story where it would be cool if they cross over. Stuff connects to a previous series when they think it would be cool. But if you ever actually try to put any of it together, that shit doesn't make sense, you know?
Right.
It's all about telling a cool story.
Yeah, and I love that. I love
Me
it.
too.
It's here. It's more for the story. It's more for the metaphor. In this case, it's really more for just the metaphor of we're the 80s. We need Godzilla again to remind us of the mistakes that we've made. Basically,
freedom of storytelling. I tell you.
Yeah.
Don't limit it. Yeah. Don't put chains on it.
Yeah.
Continuity is a bane.
Yeah.
That's dramatic, but it's not as important, I think, as people think it should be.
Sure. Yeah. That's why I played the long game with setting up this conversation to be had early. Maybe that was, I don't know if that worked out as well as I wanted to. Maybe it was a little frustrating.
No, it's interesting to me.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and that's where we're at with this movie. He back. But yeah, where do you want to start with this?
Oh boy. I think we started to touch generally sort of on like how the narrative of this movie is maybe not its strongest point, and how it kind of in several ways just retells the story of the first one.
Yeah.
And I think even because Raids was what it was, kind of retells the story of both of those movies. So like what's interesting to me is now I've sort of seen 3 Godzilla movies, and this isn't a problem. There's a bazillion Godzilla movies. It's bound to happen. But I've kind of seen 3 Godzilla movies that feature pretty much the same main cast in just sort of like different careers, you know? So like we had the fish. Yeah, we had like the fishermen, we had the military, and now we have like the reporters. And if I'm going to pick a favorite, it's probably the reporters, although I think the fisherman thing is cool. So I was excited by that. I don't know that the reporter thing goes as far as I really wish it had. And I don't know that the human story in this movie shines very much at all, which is a bummer because there's really cool stuff they could have done with that. And they start to with is it Maki who's the reporter?
Goro Maki is the reporter.
Yeah. Who tries to tell this story, and then the story is covered up. And I was immediately really intrigued by that. I was like,
Mhm.
oh shit, because at this point it's early enough in the movie that I don't really know what they're tackling as far as like commentary or like any sort of like
Mhm.
modern sort of statement. So the fact that it had to do with like the government suppressing news from the people, I was like, oh hell yeah, this is where we're going. And then it doesn't really go there.
Yeah.
So I initially was really excited about our protagonist Maki, if that's who. I mean, I think that's who the protagonist
I think he's
is meant
supposed
to
to
be
be the protagonist. Yeah.
I was really excited for him in the first half, and then kind of was like, well, okay.
Well, and
He
it's
turns more into like, just sort of very similar to, not to disparage either of our, two former protagonists in Tsukioka or Ogata, but like he kind of just turns into them after a certain point,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost like, why are you even here with these like science people right now? Like, what are you? I mean, like, I know you're trying to help, but like,
Well, especially after he kind of like does them dirty.
Yeah, here's my biggest issue with the human story is that, like, I mean, not a surprise for like, a science fiction movie from 1984, but like, the romance feels very forced, and I think there's no chemistry between the two at all, between Goromaki and Naoko. However, I see a universe where this story could have been really interesting, where it's like this reporter guy comes in and just, does this lady and her family dirty and kind of exploits them, and then sees her reaction, and then is sort of like actually feels bad about it, feels guilty about it, and then helps them out of guilt. And then Naoko sort of sees that side of him and falls for him based on seeing like this vulnerable side of a man that she actually previously was really mad at and was pushing back against. And they could have played that, they could have played the tension of her, like, they could have played like the, I want to slap you, but now I want to kiss you kind of thing, of like, I'm so mad at you, but I do see that you're a good person deep down. They don't play any of that. I'm sorry.
No.
Apologies to Naoko, but like, nothing character.
No.
You're so way too mellow.
It's
like,
it's getting like, I'm not like losing hope. I'm not going to be dramatic, but like to this point, I'm like, I like, we can't just like keep chasing the Ogata Emiko thing. Like they did it well. Like, and I understand the second movie I watched was a sequel where they were rushing, right? And so like, of course they're just going to sort of create cheap facsimiles of some of the stuff from the first one. And then this is sort of a reboot and retelling. So it's a weird order to sort of examine this relationship in, but even in a vacuum, zero chemistry. Like nothing about them is convincing.
Yeah, it makes it interesting doing that order though, because I don't know if we were doing these chronologically, there'd be so much space between those movies that you wouldn't really notice. But it does make it clear that it's sort of like, when you're trying to recapture the original Godzilla movies for this, you're also trying to recapture that aspect. But it makes it clear like how good the original Godzilla's movie's human story was, that it's sort of like how easy it is to apparently miss the mark on it completely when you're trying to sort of redo it.
Well, it's weird because I don't know why it's so easy to miss the mark, because it really is just a matter of like focusing on the humans. And in this movie, there's like pretty long stretches where you just don't see our main characters. There's sort of like a trio quartet sort of main human characters, and pretty long spans without any updates. And then you get like a big dose, It's like it's big dose and then very little of them, and then like big dose. It's sort of spaced weird.
It's almost like they tried to make this more of an ensemble movie a bit, because you have Goromaki and Naoko and their romance, and they're obviously, overlapping with Dr. Hayashida and Hiroshi, right? Because Hiroshi is Naoko's brother. Which is funny. They don't have a love triangle in this movie, but they still have this third person in her brother. But that almost like, because it's not a love triangle thing, it means that like he kind of has nothing to do in the relationship. And I wish that maybe he like hated Goromaki more or something like that. I don't know.
Well, it's strange. Like, the fact that it's not a love triangle, but it still feels so similar to the other two is like so really weird. Bizarre. And it's so funny weird. Because again, there's how many movies, like what number of Godzilla movies is 84? Like how many Godzilla movies into the franchise is it?
16.
Okay. So there's 13 other movies I haven't seen. And I know that they kind of go on a weird trajectory where I'm guessing at a certain point, the human story is completely lost. But, there's so many different relationship dynamics you can sort of portray just by changing up the number of people involved. And it's so bizarre that there was like another trio and it wasn't like a 1-to-1 of the first one. Yeah. Like, it almost would have made more sense if they did a straight up 1-to-1 of the first one as like an homage.
Yeah. Yeah. But because it stands, like, you know, I feel bad for Hiroshi, but he's like, really has nothing. Like, he's literally doing things in the movie because he's involved with all the special science stuff. Yeah. And he does the cool helicopter thing. But like, character wise, like, once he gets past like the big trauma of all of his friends being mummified by a sea louse on a boat, and then it's totally fine after that. Like, I feel like they could have dug a little deeper into you, buddy, but okay.
I think he's sort of in the Tsukioka position where it's like there's a more compelling person in the trio.
Sure.
But you're doing stuff. And Tsukioka's got the benefit of being like smoking hot. So not that anybody in this is like particularly ugly, but like Tsukioka, come on.
By the way, he's in this movie, Tsukioka.
What the fuck? Where?
He is the geologist, the guy who does the soda bottle demonstration of the erupting volcano.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'll send you. Wait, I can't send screenshots over Zoom. No, I can't text you because it's on my computer. I'll send you via Twitter, I guess. Yeah. I'll send you the image because I took the screenshot of him talking about like causing stuff to erupt, which I was like, that's appropriate.
Right.
And I didn't even really pick up on that being him until I was looking through the cast, and I was like, oh my God. And
okay, that makes me feel better because I didn't notice.
No, I didn't. I mean, because he looks very different in 1984 than he did in 1955. I would think so.
Oh, he's still really
hot.
Good looking.
He's still hot.
He's
still
very
good looking.
Holy
I'm
shit.
holding a soda bottle saying, in much the same way, it takes little force to cause an eruption. And I'm like,
wow.
Yep. If you pop that collar, ooh, yep.
Still got it.
I love that. Speaking of, while we're on this tangent, and we'll go back to talking more deeply about the characters, Dr. Hayashida was originally going to be played by Akihiko Harada, who played Dr. Serizawa in the original Godzilla movie.
Whoa.
They were originally going to bring him back as a fun reference, right? To have him play the doctor. The only reason that he didn't was because he became like seriously ill before they could film. He actually died like shortly before the film was released.
That's such a bummer.
So this was almost his final film role, which would have been cool. And you will see him in other movies. He's actually popped up in other Godzilla movies. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So it would have also been like a really nice, another passing of the torch of the whole Showa era to be like a recurring Showa actor and someone who played a major role in the original Godzilla movie to come back for your big reboot. They almost did it. And the actor who does play Dr. Hayashida, who I like, he's perfectly fine in this movie, Yosuke Natsuki, he appeared in another role in a Showa movie too. So he's someone that we're going to see again on this podcast. So they still got a veteran Toho actor to play in the role, but he said that he was like, I actually didn't know the guy who played Serizawa was originally slated, and I probably would have said no if they told me that, because the idea of replacing that guy like I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Probably good he didn't know then.
Yeah.
Wow, man, that's so exciting, because Serizawa was like, I mean, I know he wouldn't be playing the character of Serizawa, but just like knowing that the same guy, because Serizawa is so interesting, like such a good character. Yeah.
There's two other. I won't spoil it for you, but there's like two other actors in this movie in the main cast that you're going to see again too, which is so fucking fun.
Nice.
Yeah, they really love reusing these actors.
That's great. I'm all for it.
And the actress who plays Naoko, Yusuko Sawaguchi, this was the second film role she'd ever done. She was the winner of the first Toho Cinderella contest in 1984, was honored Newcomer of the Year for this role. And she's also
this role.
For this role, yes, and is also a singer. She performed the song Goodbye Lover, which is the song you hear at the beginning of the movie that Maki is listening to on his boat. So that's her singing that.
Gotcha.
So I feel like she's kind of, Cinderella contest. I think she's meant to be like your pop star idol person,
She's
and honestly,
very pretty.
You feel that in the movie.
She sounds great.
Yes. I'm happy for her. I wish that maybe they got someone with a little more. Her character isn't written very well, to be fair. So you'd have to get someone very, very good to bring some depth. But she doesn't really add a lot to the character, unfortunately.
Yeah, I will say, like, I almost wonder if a lot of it is how her character is written and directed, because it almost feels like she's just meant to be there to sort of be like, You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, she's literally meant to be there to be pretty.
And I'm just not sure like how much you do with that. So I don't know. I guess there's a part of me that is with you where it's like somebody could be more electric than that, right? Like we've talked about actors who don't do that much but are electric, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the friend. I don't remember her name because she's barely in the movie, but like the friend at the radio, like who works on the radio. Like I still remember her. Like she popped, you know? So I agree with you in that sense, but there's a part of me that feels for her because like I don't know what she was supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Like who's my character? A girl.
Yeah. Pretty girl.
You're sad about your brother,
worried.
but now he's here, so you're happy. And now Godzilla's there, so you're scared.
Yeah.
Like what depth is there? Yeah, it's a real bummer. Well, there are better female characters on the horizon, Doug. Don't worry, you will eventually run into them. Because we haven't had a good track record.
So we get a movie with 2 women who are central to the story. I know I'm expecting a lot from 3 movies that occurred in the 50s and the 80s, but
yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah. Oh, also, this is so random. I don't know if it's true because I was like, how deep do I went into this rabbit hole?
Yeah.
Apparently, Akira Toriyama, who created Dragon Ball, is like one of the extras in the crowd running from Godzilla at one point. There's like a photo that I found it on a Reddit post, and then they linked to a page of where it came from, and it was a Japanese page that I couldn't translate, and I think it might have been an old page that was taken down. So I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it's true, but at least that is a rumor that one of the people, it's a photo of him on set, supposedly, with the extras there. So supposedly Akira Toriyama is there.
Why not? That's like exactly.
Timing would make sense.
Oh, totally. And that's exactly the kind of thing that's like perfect for, well, wait, what did it even, 80, wait, this is 84?
84.
Okay. But like that's the perfect kind of thing that you could just put anybody into. It's sort of like being in the background of a Jedi fight in Attack of the Clones. You know what I mean? Like you could put anybody back there, you know? And it's like cool for them and cool if you know it.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just kind of fun and weird.
Has Toriyama ever done any official Godzilla stuff?
I'm not
like
sure.
Like artwork?
Actually.
I'm certain he has to have drawn Godzilla at some point because I can imagine it in my mind. Even if he never did it officially, but I do wonder.
There's definitely I feel like there's like Godzilla homages in Dragon Ball, right?
I'm sure.
So
if not Godzilla, certainly some sort of Godzilla like, and even just like certain, species on Earth that he draws, I'm sure are inspired by kaiju.
Yeah, I'm seeing stuff that's confusing because I don't know. I can't tell if it's official.
If it's just like in
Godzilla
the style of Toriyama or something.
Yeah, because there's a Wikipedia page on the Dragon Ball wiki for Godzilla. First mentioned in the I can't. Really
I wouldn't be surprised if Godzilla somehow appeared even briefly, or was mentioned, or appeared on like a screen somewhere in Dragon Ball.
Yeah, it looks like
Dragon
there's
Ball
like
Z.
Godzilla cameos throughout Dragon Ball and some of other all
right, I'll take it.
Work. So I guess that makes sense.
I'll absolutely take that.
Sure. Yeah.
I bet he draws an adorable Godzilla.
Yeah, there's many different ones. So that was a fun little rabbit hole. I will explore that further because that seems really fun. Love that. Thank you for asking that.
You mentioned the boat though, and you mentioned how this movie kicks off.
Yeah, wild, right?
What was I watching? Like it was cool, but like when I started watching the movie, I was like, I am watching the correct movie, right? Because it's very there are moments of this movie that feel very inspired by I imagine the horror movies that happened between the 50s and this movie, and this is absolutely one of them. I was like, this is like a horror movie. This is not what I was expecting. And obviously Godzilla 54 is horrifying, but it's sort of in this weird gray area on whether you would actually call it a horror movie or not. Mm-hmm. The start of this movie is straight up a horror sequence.
Yeah.
Like
I think that
finding the crew and all that. Holy shit.
Yeah, right. And it feels so not at home with a kaiju movie because obviously kaiju stuff you're expecting, wider scale destruction and action, and the horror of everything is people dying in some devastating disaster.
It's not like purely collateral damage,
Right. And in this case, it's like an investigative reporter going on a silent abandoned boat full of mummified corpses in a big sea louse that's trying to suck the blood out of his body. Like, yeah, it is weird. I do think that comes from like the inspiration that Tanaka had when he was pitching this of like seeing stuff like The Thing and like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Alien, you know, that we mentioned before. And it's like, if they can do science fiction horror, then we can instill some of that in our Godzilla too. I think it's just weird because it really is only present in that one scene in the opening, and the whole rest of the movie just feels like a kaiju movie. Like I feel like the horror element kind of disappears after that.
Yeah, I think honestly the only thing that makes it slightly dissonant is the sort of like obvious horror homage that feels like straight up a horror movie, because I do like the idea that somebody stumbles across this sort of like unsettling piece of evidence that leads to the discovery of Godzilla, you know, as opposed to just like bumping into Godzilla. I think that's fun. And I can't imagine it's the last time we're going to see something like that. So I like it, but I just was so surprised by it. And so like, not confused isn't even the right word, because I was following it, but I just was like shocked that the sort of mummified stuff happened. And I guess maybe a little bit surprised also that the louse was the only other thing. Like, they explained the louse, right? Like it grew to that size because it had been feeding on Godzilla, which is this, you know, monster affected by radioactivity and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. But I kind of was wondering if we would see anything more like that. And in this movie, we don't, but I'm sure, you know, just the nature of this universe, I'm sure we do see things similar to that.
Yeah. It's an interesting choice. Like it's memorable that it's in there, you know? But it is like, I think it's like it's a weird way to kick off this movie. And like you said, like, it's weird that that's like the only element we see of it. It's sort of like the sea louse is this movie's version of the trilobite from the original movie. But you know, that was like, obviously it was a fossil representative of like, this is how old Godzilla is. But it is just something else of sort of like, this is a thing that is sort of attached to Godzilla in some way as proof to what we're dealing with. And it's a cool idea. Yeah. But it's like, it feels like something that it's like, why is it in there? It's like they could have accomplished everything they did by just having Goromaki stumble upon the wreckage of the boat, just like in the original. Well, and I'm okay with the change to this, but it's like, I wish they had found other things to bring in to connect to it throughout the movie too.
It's funny because I don't know that it makes for like the objectively best storytelling to do it the way that they did it. But there's part of me that really admires that they were sort of like, this could have been more elegant. This could have been simpler. But what if we just have a bunch of like corpses on a boat? You know what I mean?
It's
like
fun.
It doesn't really make sense as like the way to do this, but like you said, it's memorable. I'm never gonna forget this. It's really weird to kick your reboot off this way, but I won't forget it.
The mummified corpses in the Godzilla movie you watched. Like, never thought I was gonna see that.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So strange.
Yeah.
I do like that it starts with a fishing boat, though. I think that's fun and feels very I mean, I don't know how much that is like a just constant thread, but knowing that I skipped ahead 13 movies, it feels like it was very intentionally meant to be an homage to that first and second one.
I think so too. I think that was a very intentional parallel. I like the bit. I'd almost wish they'd even like hammered this in a little bit, given that this is the 80s, but like when Maki is like trying to convince his editor to not let this be covered up, like warn the public about it. The editor's sort of like, oh, you know, we can't warn the public because it'll cause panic, which you expect. But then he says like stocks will plunge. There would be political uprisings. And then he starts that comment with stocks would plunge. Yeah. Like that feels so 80s to me, right? Yeah. And it's like, that's where the commentary stops, unfortunately. But I love that at least that is in there.
Well, that's interesting because like if this weren't a movie that had a central Cold War piece to its plot, I could see that being the sort of like 80s period piece. Obviously not at the time period, but like to us, like plot point, right? Like it would have felt like it fit in so perfectly. Sort of, the stocks will plummet and the economy, you know, like I could see that being sort of what they wanted to explore as the sort of like corrupt human element that gets in the way of addressing things properly. I think I prefer maybe it's just because I was right and so I'm biased towards what they actually did because it was what I predicted. But I think I like the Cold War thing more because it feels more in line with what Godzilla actually comes from. You know,
I think you were right that it would be ridiculous to do an '84 Godzilla movie and not incorporate the Cold War in a major way. That would be like what. It would be truly stupid to do that. So yeah.
And I do like the way that they did it. I think it I was quite confident it would come up, but I just wasn't sure like how, because you can kind of if you just gave somebody the context of how the first Godzilla movie sort of was born historically, right? Between, you know, World War II and the occupation and all that sort of stuff, somebody could probably guess the attitude that exists in that movie towards particular world powers. But I was curious to see what it would look like here, and I was not disappointed. Japan's sort of relationship with these two Cold War superpowers, I liked what they did. I liked the dialogue they were having. I liked where the Prime Minister landed and how he delivered what he delivered. Like, obviously it's a complicated thing that they had to boil down, but I liked the way that they did it.
I do too. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think we were talking about where like you go with long stretches without our sort of like, you know, core cast, is because we spend a lot of stretches in the political space with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister kind of is one of the leads of the movie, even though it doesn't really get like, you know, a really intense like character arc. The dealings that he's doing and having to make these hard decisions, like that is a huge part of this movie, more than the other two that we've watched, like for sure.
Well, so and much so that the image that I will take with me as the sort of human finale reaction to everything that happens is his, not anyone else's.
I agree.
His.
Yeah, that the tear that he has coming out his eye.
Shit.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I mean, like I think that he is the most successful human character in this movie. Which again, he doesn't have like extensive character stuff, but the political dealings that he's dealing with that are sort of representative of what it would be like to be in that role, like speak so much. In the idea of you know this guy in power, like having such a hard stance on like we are not going to bomb our own country, or really in this case, we're not going to let you guys bomb our country again. Like that's never happening here. We will find an alternate solution to this.
But the fact that it's not even immediate like that, the fact that they are confronted with this decision of, do we let the superpowers or one of the superpowers that was directly responsible for bombing our country do it again? And it's not an immediate no, because Godzilla is such a ridiculous threat that they're like, what do we do? I like those decisions. I like that each one of these movies has had to deal with like the consequences of addressing Godzilla and the lengths to which, or the degrees to which you actually have to go to even try to stop Godzilla, creates a scenario where he actually has to like pause and then reconvene and be like, would you bomb Moscow or DC? Because I don't think you would. Like you're only doing this because it's us and not you. And I love that that you know, he has that one advisor that's like, dude, this is very clearly just them eager to finally test this shit out, and we get to be their project. Like, fuck that.
Fuck that. Yeah.
Love all that stuff. Love it.
Mitamura is his name.
Yeah.
Just want to put respect to the Prime Minister.
Totally. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, that actor is really good in this as well. Like, Keiju Kobayashi plays him. He is really good because it's like, I mean, it is something where like these scenes could be really boring if they were played badly. And I think they do some really good camera work too, because like you will get like this close up. I don't remember what the technique is called, but it's where it's like both the foreground and background are in focus at the exact same time. And they do that with the Prime Minister's face, where you just see like the corner of his face and his glasses, and you see like, you know, the Soviet representative on one side and the American representative on the other side, and you just, you know, see it from both his perspective. And he's just got to be sitting here listening to these two superpowers argue about whether they should bomb his country, you know, and like and says nothing for a long stretch of time while these two dudes are arguing, which makes it more and you can tell that the wheels are turning and everything with him. And you see it on his face until it's to the point where it's just sort of like, I've had enough. This is where my stance is.
Yeah.
and it's really powerful. It's really well done.
It is.
It also stands out that, like, you know, he's the best actor in the room compared to the
Okay.
American and Russian
Glad
guy they
you
have.
said it. Especially that American.
American. Oh, my God,
that
dude.
ambassador from America. So bad.
Where did you find this man? My God.
It honestly makes me wonder, and maybe you came across this or can answer this. It honestly gave me the vibes of like, this is not actually an American actor, even though it might be like somebody like of obvious European descent. Like, is this like a Japanese person who is not Japanese? And so they're speaking English, but not as an actual first language. Like, it almost gave those vibes. You know what I mean? Like, they hired a white actor who's Japanese.
Yeah, I think that comes up in these movies. I mean, I think it probably comes up in a lot of Japanese movies.
Sure.
It's just cheaper to hire like, why wouldn't you hire someone that's literally in your country than shipping someone over from another country, right? So I think that's something that will come up in many of these Godzilla movies. Yeah, I don't know. I was looking at, I don't see information on this particular actor, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Or it's someone, he was, you know, a white guy who grew up and was raised in Japanese, and Japanese was actually his first language. Yeah, it does feel like that when he's talking.
Right. In which case, I feel for him. That's not easy, you know.
Yeah. Right.
But still, extremely wooden, not pleasant to watch.
Yeah, but you know what? He's not a particularly good guy anyway. So I guess it kind of works out. Who cares? Yeah. It makes the prime minister look better by comparison.
Primarily, they just needed those two to like yell at the prime minister in like an inappropriate way, you know?
Right.
And they do that.
Yeah,
I loved that stuff. I think that was honestly by far the most compelling human stuff. Yeah. And therefore probably the best stuff of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that stuff is really well done. That's sort of that is definitely the way that they dealt with the political aspect, I think, is the highlight of the movie. I also think it is really wild, like the idea that there is a literal threat of an accidental nuclear missile, like for a portion of the movie.
God.
It is terrifying because it's like,
this movie's got twists, dude.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't really wrap my head around how you can accidentally launch a nuclear missile, even with Godzilla being involved. Feels like there's some fail safes missing.
I mean, I kind of walked away, if it wasn't necessarily like explicitly so, I did kind of walk away with the feeling that despite the prime minister saying like, no, absolutely not, the two superpowers were still like ready with their finger on the button, you know? Yeah. And not necessarily trusting that Japan could make decisions for itself. And so, you shouldn't be able to accidentally launch a nuclear missile. But I think if you have this, you know, Soviet superpower ready to basically baby Japan and be like, all right, we let you pretend that you had control of the situation, but we're going to step in at any moment, then I can kind of see how you accidentally launch a nuclear missile, you know? Plus, this wouldn't be the only time that like people have not necessarily literally accidentally fired a nuclear missile, but have had scares of, holy shit, did somebody just fire a nuclear missile? And then be like, wait, no, JK, they didn't. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Although I did have to look this up, and maybe you can cross-check me on this. Okay. There have never been satellites in orbit that carry nuclear warheads, right?
I hope not.
I don't think that has ever happened. I do believe that was science fiction.
I would be terrified if that was a real thing. That they're just
I think it's like internationally illegal's probably not the right word, but I think everybody's agreed that's not allowed.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah.
But I mean, it works. You know, they get to do their cool like satellite shots.
Right.
Which I liked. I thought they were really neat.
Oh, I think they look really cool. And you know, this is I've said it like I think in every episode so far that I want to do, you know, separate episodes on like the American cuts of like the original Godzilla and this movie specifically because they're so interesting.
This one would be fascinating.
It's not good. I mean, Raymond Burr is great, but most things in this movie are pretty bad in the American version. But one thing that is fucking wild is, you know, how it's a Soviet missile that accidentally is launched, and it's like you have this whole sequence of the Soviet guy just trying really hard to get to it to stop it, but he dies before he can. Kind of tragic. It's like a heroic death for him, even though he doesn't really accomplish anything, unfortunately. In the American movie, it's just sort of like, I have to launch the missile. Like, they make him evil. Like, yeah,
that's fascinating.
I mean, it's because they're it's the Americans, and that's their one opportunity to make the Soviets look bad in their American movie. Like, that's
I know, but it's not like the Soviets look better than the Americans in the version that Japan made. The Americans are still the ones that like pull off stopping the missile, you know?
Oh, like, they make a whole thing about that in the American cut.
But I mean, it's still what happens in this one, you know? Like, it's still even if it's all presented relatively neutrally, for whatever reason, they did land on the Soviets accidentally launch it, and the Americans are able to swoop in and fix it. And they even make a point to say that the Soviets are like, oh, well, we would have to line things up and do it. And, you know, then they're like, we wouldn't have time for them, but we can turn to the Americans and they're ready to go, you know, like, so I think like maybe a bit more subtly than, definitely a little bit more subtly than it sounds like the American version does it. Like, I still think America comes out looking not pretty good, but better. Than the Soviets.
Pretty good by comparison to the Soviets. Like, bad in the grand scheme of things, but good compared to the Soviets. Yeah.
Which I just find interesting in a movie where, like, it's interesting that in a Godzilla movie, which is born out of this anxiety over, you know, nuclear fallout, because Japan is the only country that's ever had these weapons directly used against them. It's interesting that you have America save you from another one.
I wouldn't be surprised if part of that was because they knew that Godzilla at this point had a level of popularity in America, and they were hoping that this would take off in American theaters, because this was theatrically released in America, and it didn't do very well. I don't remember exactly. Oh, well, it was 1984. So no matter what was in theaters, it was going to be like one of the most popular movies ever made against it. So like it did not stand a chance. And then, you know, and you don't get any movies released in American theaters like for years after this movie. Yeah. So I think that they really kind of were banking on the possibility of being able to distribute this in America. I mean, the 1985 cut of it, obviously, but like when they were making it, I think knowing that America will adapt this somehow and show it in their theaters. And so they kind of were like,
give America their little heroic moment.
We'll give you and then America takes it and runs with it in their cut of it.
Well, sure.
But I'm excited to talk about that one day, because that movie is fucking wow. There's some choices in that movie.
All right.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up here because that was like one of the most glaring things from talking about the Soviet stuff. But yeah, we were speaking about the sort of the science fiction of the satellite thing, and I do think the other science fiction element is the Super X like hovercraft.
Oh my god,
vehicle.
Oh my god. So can I tell you, I got this on Blu-ray, right? I managed to get it from a library on Blu-ray, which I was really excited about.
Cool. Very cool.
But I made sure not to like look at it closely, because you know, DVDs and Blu-rays have pictures and screen grabs on the back. I did happen to catch a glimpse of the Super X on the back of the box, or back of the case, and didn't look any further, and it was like, I don't think this is what's going to happen, but it would be fucking wild if this movie was like an Aliens and Godzilla movie, because it looks like a spaceship. The Super X totally looks like a spaceship. So I was like, is this like, instead of Godzilla versus another kaiju, Godzilla versus aliens? Like, it was so weird, and I'm so glad that wasn't the case. I bet that happens at some point, but I'm glad it didn't happen for this one, you know?
Yeah. I do think it's interesting for you going from, you know, the original two Godzillas to this one, and for this movie that is, for all intents and purposes, meant to be sort of like doing the original again and you know, rebooting and sequelizing, going back to its roots. You still get like this sort of it's almost like the sort of retaining an element of the Showa era, where it's like Godzilla did at a certain point become more of a fantastical sci-fi movie. And so even though they're going back to its roots, like it's almost like they didn't fully they didn't strip it of all the elements of the Showa era, you know, because the original Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again, you know, it's sci-fi to the extent that there is Godzilla and like an oxygen destroyer, but there are no other science fiction elements outside of that. Right. And so if you're watching these three movies in succession, the Super X is a pretty big jump in like a science fiction element, you know?
It's pretty weird.
It is. And I think even in context, it's sort of like, You chose to do that. I think it makes sense. Like, again, it makes sense knowing how weird the Showa era got, that it's like, it's less weird by comparison, but like if you're really trying to do a dark, realistic, gritty Godzilla movie, the spaceship is a weird choice.
Yeah.
And I do think it sets the stage for like where these movies are going to go beyond this with science fiction stuff. But it is an element, I think, of this being such a transition movie from the old era to where they're at now. Cause it's sort of like the Super X, I think, does stick out like a sore thumb when you're looking at this movie.
I think so.
You know, like and it almost is like not really that relevant either. Like it's some cool action sequences from it, but it's like not. It's important.
I don't think it does anything cool enough to outweigh that it's not doing anything a tank couldn't do. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
I know that a tank isn't built to shoot cadmium bullets into Godzilla's mouth or whatever, but like, I can believe it. Like, there's no reason you couldn't still just fire that from a tank or something. I don't know. It sticks out like a sore thumb. The idea of it didn't like take me out or anything. It wasn't like so bizarre, because I don't know confidently, but I feel like I'm pretty aware of the fact that Godzilla gets pretty weird in the sci-fi realm. So like this, I guess I assumed the ceiling for weird sci-fi was just well beyond this, so maybe it didn't register to me as like that bizarre.
I think it makes sense. Yeah,
but it is bizarre, especially if the only other two movies are like these pretty grounded, sort of on the human side of things responses to Godzilla. Yeah, I mean, like, I think they're using flares in the second one, just flares. You know, like I know that there's more than that, but like that's one of their solutions, is to like bombard the sky with flares. Yeah, it's so funny having that context for you, and I mean for us for the podcast, really going through in the order that we're going. And it just, I think, makes it so clear how, like, as much as they wanted to, you know, respond to the Showa era and like really, like, they've said it over and over again, but like return to its roots of the original Godzilla and everything, as much as they wanted to do that, like they still can't escape the context in which Godzilla exists, you know? Oh, definitely not.
Yeah, like even trying to like present this being like to a new generation, and it's sort of like this is what Godzilla kind of used to be. It's like you still have like basically a human spaceship in there though. Well, like it's so funny.
It's difficult because like you can't just ignore that there is a legacy of Godzilla. Like there's a meta there that you can't eliminate. And if you're going to reboot something, you can't just do the exact same thing, you know? So like you have to, even if you're rebooting, you have to decide like what the new direction is, even if you start from a similar place. Yeah. So, you know, even franchises that have done the most egregious sort of like one-to-one reboots are still tweaking things and changing things to have some sort of signature element. Right.
Yeah, and it's another thing that one of the reason I find this movie so fascinating is like the Super X and stuff like that, because it's like, and now it's established, so like movies after this can be like, well, we exist in a world where we have the Super X, so we can do cool sci-fi shit now, and you know, you can accept it, but like this movie has to almost have the burden of like figuring out exactly how much sci-fi they want to have or not in it, and it's like it's almost gonna feel weird either way, right? Because it's like exactly what space is this occupying, and you know that's just it's so representative of everything that makes this movie sort of an oddity in the realm of Godzilla.
God, I had no idea what to expect when they started describing the Super X, because it's like a weird name. Super X to me sounds like an element or a weapon or you know, something like that. But at one point they describe it as a fortress. At one point they describe it as like something that was specifically developed like with Godzilla in mind. And knowing the little bit that I do, I was like, this certainly can't be where they introduce like Mecha Godzilla, can it? Like that crossed my mind, and I was like, that can't be real. That cannot be what I'm preparing for. And this was certainly not that, but I just had no idea. Basically like a weird alien spaceship never crossed my mind as a possibility. Yeah, there were so many other things. I was thinking like some sort of weird sci-fi tank or some sort of weird, like, I don't know, like a building opening up and there being like a secret, like, you know, I don't know. There were so many things I thought, and this was not one of them.
Yeah. It's so fun.
And there's like the shot where it's just like floating there watching Godzilla.
It's so strange.
Like, that's all it's doing. It's just sitting there, you know?
There are a lot of moments of things just sitting there. like
And
yeah,
I do kind of appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that I really liked, one of the highlights to me of raids was specifically those quiet like moments, right? It doesn't do a ton of things really well, but it does the quiet moments really well. And I like that this movie, which is way more explosive and way more like, you know, like I don't know, like special effectsy when combat is happening. I appreciate that it didn't forget to have some quiet moments. You know, like there are moments where Godzilla is just out and they are just waiting to see what happens. Or there are moments where like they try their little like, is it magnetism? Is that what they're using? They're doing some sort of like
the homing device thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
whatever they get from the birds, right? Like the birds use the poles of the earth and they make a thing that simulates that basically. Yeah. Like there's moments where they try that and then they just are waiting to see what Godzilla does. I love those moments. I hope that like all the best Godzilla movies, or maybe I should say like I'm expecting the best Godzilla movies to all take advantage of those like quiet moments where everything is just like on the razor's edge and just being like, what's going to happen next? Those I think are always going to land with me, and maybe even in the worst movies, because Raids isn't particularly good, but it does those moments well, you know? So this one has some of those, and I was worried it wouldn't, because anytime there was combat, it was so big. I mean, the combat was so many explosions and so much smoke and so many sparks, and sometimes it's really cool, but I was worried we wouldn't get any of those quiet moments.
No, you're right, and it makes it more rewarding because there's the point when Godzilla's been unconscious for a while, and I really like the cleverness of how they cross the accidental missile launch and like weave that thread into how Godzilla like wakes up and gets repowered.
Oh yeah,
because you know America shoots down the Soviet missile in the atmosphere, but like, and it's just this cool like red sky effect that's really creepy and really eerie, and it's all very quiet. There's some good like sort of kind of interesting like sci-fi sort of music that's happening there. I like the music in this movie generally. I think it's actually pretty good considering this composer's only done this movie, but it just becomes this quiet, eerie moment where the radiation just forms into like lightning essentially that strikes Godzilla. It's so fucking cool. You see close-ups on his eyes opening up and you see the reflection of the lightning in his eyes as he's waking up. It's so fucking good.
There is a moment, because you mentioned the close-up on the eye. I think it's right before Godzilla uses its atomic breath for the first time that they do like a really sharp zoom in on his face.
Yeah.
There's like a couple moments that are so close to being corny that just for some reason work based on how they build the sequence that like really struck me. That was one of them, the one you're mentioning, but then also the atomic breath one is one that really struck me. Yeah, it's interesting. It's you know, that whole sequence of like, we knocked Godzilla out, but now we have this other problem that we have to solve. We've solved that problem, but then it undid the thing that we solved earlier by knocking Godzilla out. Like it's kind of cool. It has the energy of the escaped prisoners like accidentally bringing Godzilla back, you know?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
It has that energy to it, and in like a less kind of slapsticky way. But I like it because it kind of feels like that, and that was one of my favorite parts of Godzilla Raids again.
No, that the whole lightning sequence, so fucking cool, so good.
And that's a thing, right? Is like nuclear fallout lightning a thing, or am I just fully making that up?
I don't know. I thought they were just like doing a cool thing.
I don't know.
But you might be right. I don't know.
Somebody let me know. I don't know if I just like fully made that up or if that's a thing that like occurs in like nuclear explosions. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not positive, but I mean, I don't know. I guess it could make sense that it would cause something with like static electricity or something like that. Yeah, that's really interesting. That'd be even cooler if that was like true to life, what they were doing there. I was just accepting it like Godzilla's magic and radiation turns into lightning to wake him up. Sure, that's fucking cool. That's rad as shit, dude.
Yeah. No, it could only be cooler if like the lightning struck him and you saw like the electricity like course through his body, and that's when he turned into Bones Godzilla. But no, it's awesome. I mean, it was a really cool way to sort of take you on kind of like a loop-de-loop in the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, like the homing beacon thing. There's some interesting things with Godzilla's biology in this, where it's like, first of all, they reference it as active sonar in this movie, which I think is very funny to me. I don't really understand that, but sure, I guess.
Is what bats do sonar? I'm genuinely asking because I don't know.
So, isn't
is
it?
like is that what dolphins do too? Is like sonar?
Yeah.
So is that the implication? Is like Godzilla has like marine sonar?
Because their whole deal was that it was like, it can't be what they're seeing can't be a whale because whales don't have sonar. So what could be something that's not another sub that has sonar? And then that's Godzilla. They say specifically whales don't have sonar.
I'm just like thinking about that now because
is that
I don't know
true
enough
or not?
about marine biology.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know the difference between sonar and what marine animals do, or if there is a difference. Whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Like maybe it does make sense, but that did sort of clock for me as sort of like, Godzilla has sonar? Okay.
Sure.
I guess. Sure.
I imagine that Godzilla is sort of like how I maybe used to view Superman, which is sort of like
every
when he needs a new power, he has a new power, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the bird thing in this movie is such an odd choice because it's like, I guess it makes sense, the dinosaur connection, you know?
Sure.
Dinosaurs related to birds. I don't know how sort of common knowledge that was in 1984, but whether it was or wasn't, it makes sense now. Maybe it was a happy accident for the writers, but like, it is such an interesting choice because it almost makes Godzilla even more of an animal than he was in the first two, that it's sort of like he can be like he has this sort of like magnetic part of his brain that's like a homing beacon in the same way that migratory birds do, to the point that you can get him to walk in a certain direction by messing with that magnetic beacon in his brain, or sending out a beacon that his magnetic portion of his brain responds to.
It's wild because it's interesting because it does make him feel more animal. There's a part of it that like, it's clever and I found it interesting, but there's a part of it that I don't like because it almost feels like you can just sort of lead Godzilla along like you would a dog with a treat, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know the extent to which Godzilla is meant to be like an intelligent being, but which isn't to say dogs are not intelligent, but like,
I know what you mean,
something about humans being able to manipulate the sort of instincts of Godzilla and predict
it does feel weird.
Godzilla too well feels like you're taking too much away from Godzilla. Yeah, it feels too easy.
It feels too easy.
Like I think the sort of like, holy shit, we weren't expecting that. Like in the first one, when it uses its Godzilla or its atomic breath, and you're like, how the fuck are we supposed to account for that? How did anyone know it could do that? You know what I mean? Like, those types of moments are so important.
And I don't think that ever comes up in another movie, to be honest. Like this, because it would be so easy. Because anytime Godzilla appears, be like, "Here's our device. Point him to the ocean. Put him to another volcano." Or like, you know, like,
I mean, the whole of the Japanese coast would be equipped with, you know, anti-Godzilla, you know, defense satellites or whatever.
Like, you know, like they use it for this movie, and you know, that's how they can trap him in a volcano. But it's like it feels a little too writery. Like it's like they couldn't find a better way, and they wanted to have some kind of science fiction-y element. But it's also like, you have the Super X there. Do something cool with the Super X to lead them. I don't know.
But I think I'm not as down on it as I might be if this were a series I was expecting to try to maintain continuity like too strongly, because when if you know that the series isn't going to try, or you're not expecting it to necessarily, and the idea is more just like, what new story can we tell with this gargantuan beast, you kind of can like do a thing and then not have to worry about the fact that you did it before. You know, like the next movie, it's not going to bother me if they don't think to use the same exact thing, because like, well, yeah, you're going to tell a worse story if you just do the exact same thing. So let's pretend it never happened, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Or make Godzilla immune to it now for whatever reason you want. Like, you know, it's only going to be more interesting if you can't repeat the exact same thing you did last time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have some comfort in that.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that goes to the whole continuity conversation we were having earlier, really. So, I mean, that leads him to the volcano that he falls into, and I do think that moment is really, really, really well done. Like it's shot really well, and like the visuals of Godzilla falling into hell basically as he's like screaming.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Very intense.
It was really interesting because you have all of that happening, and it could have just been that. but it's also cut with like all these human reactions to what's going on. Basically everybody's able to watch, and you're not supposed to ask how. But they all get to watch, right? Exactly.
Where are those cameras that the prime minister's watching? I don't know.
But they all get to watch along, and it's fine. And I thought it was really striking because not only do you have the striking image of Godzilla sort of slowly descending into a pit of lava, but unlike, I think, in the first movie, where you walk away with this conflicted feeling of like, was that the right thing to do? Was that the wrong thing to do? And I think you can have a discussion when that's the only Godzilla movie you've seen about whether that was correct or not, because there's enough ambiguity within the reactions of the characters, and the destruction, the unprecedented destruction of Godzilla. You can walk away, and I said this when we talked about it, you can walk away making either argument, even if you feel sympathy for Godzilla either way. Yeah. In this one, there is no ambiguity. You are supposed to feel bad that this is happening to Godzilla. Yeah. Every single character makes sure you know that. There is no character in here. It's like the opposite of the first movie. There's like no character in here who thinks that this was like unabashedly the right thing to do, and we were right to do it,
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I think the American 1985 cut gets right is they actually make it even more intense. They like add a second scream as Godzilla's falling. That's even more like clearly intense fear as he's going down, and like even double down on that. Ooh. Like, yeah, it's really good. I mean, yeah, no, it just the whole thing. I like that about this movie is that, you're right. There really is no ambiguity here. And I do think that that does make sense in context where it's sort of like, we're in this sort of slightly more sci-fi version of the 80s where you have like, a floating like warship fortress. It's like, maybe you could find some other way to just contain him or keep him out or something.
I thought they would.
You didn't need to just drop him into a volcano.
I really didn't think they were going to kill Godzilla in this movie or try to kill Godzilla in this movie. I don't know what gave me that vibe, but I just didn't get that vibe. Maybe because what their solution was, their ultimate solution was less centered on weapons, as many weapons as they use against it. The solution wasn't weapons. It was to try to just get him away from Tokyo, and Shinjuku. So like, I really thought like this one was going to end differently. It's effective that it doesn't. But I was really surprised and really caught off guard. But that, I said like it's bookended by acknowledging its history. I think the fact that every single character reacts the way that they do, I think the fact that they put the music behind it that they do, I think the fact that the end credits music is what it is less like, here's how we want to end the story, and more like, there is now 30 years of Godzilla. He can't not be the protagonist. He's been the one common denominator. We've grown an attachment to him. You can't just have a movie where like, this beloved character that is now beloved outside of Japan is killed, and we're supposed to feel good about it. That's like, it's like the meta of it. You can't do it anymore. I mean, I'm sure you can, but like, it wouldn't feel right in this particular instance.
Yeah, it's like, we just had the return of Godzilla. Why would we have to believe again? Let him stay. Yeah. The ending of it is really strong, and it's just like, there's no postscript on it. It is like Godzilla falls into the volcano. Yeah. The prime minister sheds a tear. Everyone feels real weird about it. And then it just cuts to a fun Godzilla pop song, an ode to Godzilla. Yeah.
I mean, I like the ode to Godzilla, but it like almost undercuts the moment a little bit, because it does end on that, like, everyone feels weird about it. Also, I know the literal moment of the prime minister watching and like shedding a tear is powerful enough on its own, but for some reason the specific way they shot that, where he is standing sort of like ahead of everybody else, sort of alone, and then you just see this like wall of men in suits behind, and for some reason the angle at which they shoot it makes them all feel smaller than they actually are, which I think is really important to that moment, like, they've done something wrong and they feel bad about it, and they are literally portrayed as smaller men because of it. I think there's just something about that shot that feels like a artful photograph, like the frame,
There's some really good compositions in this movie. I think Hashimoto had a real challenge with this movie, probably just given it being the first time they're doing a Godzilla movie on this budget with this many innovations. But I think that he does a good job finding places to have really impactful shots and really impactful compositions. Like it is clear that he is, like, when we watch Raids and we're sort of like, maybe we don't want this guy to ever direct a Godzilla movie ever again. Hashimoto, I don't feel that way with. I do think that, you know, any things that I don't like how they look in this movie, like, are not the fault of the directing at all. Like, I think that he really does like a knockout job as best that he can, given what this movie is. And you really see it in a lot of these really artistic shots that they come up with.
I agree. It sure ends on a doozy. So
it really does.
Does a good job.
Yeah. Do you have any other, like, there's plenty of, we never talked about like the random, like, unhoused guy. I think he's supposed to be an unhoused guy. That whole subplot is very, it's not even a subplot. Like, this just appears a couple of times. It's very weird.
It's like, I guess, like, arguably necessary to allow them to get down, but like, there's another way you could have done that. I was hopeful that I would have feelings towards him similar to what I had for the prisoners, and it just never went there.
Yeah.
I wanted could have totally cut him out from the movie and it wouldn't have really changed that much.
I wanted him to be funnier if they were going to make him a comic character. Like, I like the idea of a guy who's like kind of unfazed by Godzilla being there and just being like, I don't walk around like you own the place. Like, well, I like that idea, but
I think a stronger version of this movie that focused more on the human element would make him one of 4 stories you follow. Because I think in a movie like this, that's an easy way to like mix it up or tell various stories and like explore humanity through more than just one person. So you have the prime minister, you have our sort of like Ogata and Emiko analog characters, right? You have this vagabond, and then you have I don't know. There's several other characters you could choose
the science,
from.
The science side of it, you know.
But like, there's all these different stories you could tell, or you could even split like the siblings and you know, Maki, right? So you could have the reporter story and you could have the siblings, and then you could tell those 4 stories, and you're getting these like different, various human perspectives. Yeah,
and they cross over at certain points and get interweaved. Yeah, I mean, I think
absolutely a way that could have been this movie.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I feel like a lot of the way this movie is presented is more of a disaster movie than it is a kaiju movie in a lot of ways, in that you see a lot of scenes of people trying to escape the rubble and devastation that has already happened in quiet moments, if that makes sense. Like, there's moments of like Maki and Naoko, like, you know, I mean, the whole helicopter sequence feels more like a disaster where they're trying to just get out of this building they're trapped in while they're surrounded by fire and stuff through this, you know, perilous helicopter, which terrifies the shit out of me. So much anxiety during that whole sequence. Yeah. But like, that feels more of a disaster movie, like Poseidon Adventure kind of thing, than a kaiju movie, you know?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but like, I think of movies like, these are not necessarily you know, universally beloved movies, but I think of things like Moonfall or 2012 or like even Day After Tomorrow. Those
Roland Emmerich movies.
Those,
but, I mean, he also did the 98 Godzilla, which does kind of what you're talking about, where it is multiple different stories that eventually cross paths.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what Moonfall does. That's what 2012 does.
I
guess I just picked one guy, but like but like that you know, in some ways, yes, it feels like a disaster movie, but it feels more like a disaster action movie and less like a disaster human movie, you know? And I think he tells like disaster human movies. And I think it's a weird distinction. It's just like different, very sub genres of disaster movie. But I think it drastically changes the tone of your movie.
Yeah, I had the Roland Emmerich thing in the back of my head, and that's a weird thing to deploy because he has directed a Godzilla movie that is not well liked, that does have that structure, but I think that the 1984 Return of Godzilla version of a Roland Emmerich structure, because you're right, all of his movies do that thing where it's like a widespread ensemble cast who sort of are very different stories while this sort of larger disaster is happening that eventually come together. I think that structure would have worked really well in this movie because they're almost at that. It is almost in that direction. It just doesn't go far enough.
Right. I'm so glad that we got to this point in the conversation, because I was trying to pinpoint exactly like what I thought was missing from the human element, and I think it's that. Like, all the human characters are there to tell a story. All the human characters are connected in various degrees to tell that story, but they just don't actually tell that story. So that would have worked so well for this one. I will be so curious to get to the 98 one, which I haven't watched since probably 1998 or 2000 or something.
It'll be a fascinating conversation
to see if I do in fact want that or not.
We'll see. Anything else about this movie that we missed that we haven't talked about?
I don't think so. We got to a lot. We got to a whole lot.
We did.
You did ask me, I think, if I thought there were going to be any other kaiju in this one, and I think I said pretty definitively no, it's a reboot, so there won't be.
You were right. Yeah, you nailed that. Yeah,
I was trying to think of the questions you asked me, and I think that was all three of them, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, the rebooting it for the 80s, how they returned Godzilla, and the other kaiju. Yeah, those are the main ones. Well, speaking of that, predictions for here's two sets of predictions for Return of Godzilla. So for the Heisei series that this has just kicked off, the next movie that's going to come after this, not the next movie we're covering. Do you think we're going to see any of these human characters again?
No. I don't think so. If I had to put my money on one, and I'm going purely on vibes, I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if we saw like Hiroshi again. Not necessarily who I want to see. I would rather see like Maki sort of retooled slightly and further explore the sort of news journalist in this setting, because I feel like this movie didn't do enough with that. But I think ultimately I'm going to say no. I also don't know when the next one comes out, so I don't know like how quickly. Because I would say,
know, or do you want to just keep that vague until we get to it?
No, I don't need to know. Because what I was going to say is I wouldn't be surprised if like the prime minister or somebody in that realm returned, depending on how soon after there's a sequel or how shortly after the events of that sequel are from this one.
Makes sense.
But ultimately, no, I don't think we're going to see any of these human characters again.
Sure. I'm going to ask that question like for every single movie we cover, because it's always going to be a surprise whether there is one or not.
I hope that someday I'm going to walk away feeling like, yes, definitely, but I just haven't gotten that vibe yet.
Yeah.
I really genuinely thought we were going to get Ogata and Emiko again. And that really, I think, like shook my core. It just is so wild that they weren't back. Or Yamane, I think, was another one I said, should have been back.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did come back, but like,
okay, yeah.
And, this ties into our whole continuity conversation and everything. This movie obviously ends with Godzilla falling into a volcano. Yeah. How do you think that they will acknowledge that in the next movie or explain it? What do you think are they like, how do you think the next movie starts off being another Godzilla movie?
I mean, I absolutely think they acknowledge it in this movie alone. They said he's immortal and maybe even said he was invincible. Like, nothing they did to the exterior of his body worked. And the only thing that they did that actually had any effect was basically just knocking him out through like, sedatives via like oral sedatives. You know what I mean? Like, it barely did anything. So throwing him into a volcano, like what? There's no guarantee that's going to do it. He's just going to crawl out of that. Like, I'm not. I'm fully convinced it will be the same Godzilla, and he just survived the volcano. Wasn't he literally like in a volcano at the beginning of this movie?
It's very unclear where he came from, I think, because they think
sometimes I got the impression that they mistook him for a volcano, and sometimes I got the impression that he was literally in a volcano. So like. Yeah, dude's fine. It's going to be the same one, and he's just going to be alive. There's no explanation needed.
Dude's fine. I love it. Dude's fine. Period. That's Godzilla.
Yeah. He survived Bones Gate, so.
Okay. Well, with all that in mind, the actual next movie that we're covering, 1999's Godzilla 2000: Millennium.
I thought so.
Yes. So this is the second time Godzilla's been rebooted. So we'll obviously talk about all that in the movie, but the context is Heisei series ends. But
interesting.
I want to do some table setting and form your expectations for this one before I ask these questions.
Okay.
Because I don't want to just set you off wildly, because it is not the same scenario of this movie. This series ends in 95. the new Godzilla era is in 1999. So it's not a huge gap in between movies. And there is the American 98 Godzilla too. So like
Right.
there's Godzilla stuff happening. I think what you should go into thinking and that people would know when they're seeing this is like, this is more of like rebooting Spider-Man situation. It's not like it's a momentous like Spider-Man's back. It's like, oh,
there's always a Spider-Man movie. Here's the new one.
Right. And this is kind of the case. It's sort of like Godzilla's back. It's been a couple of years, but like, you know, it's like it's an event in as much as The Amazing Spider-Man and like Spider-Man Homecoming was, you know, which is not the same as this movie.
No, that makes sense. Rebooting the story, not rebooting the franchise.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I think too, like I said, I think I'd said it in the intro, like the Millennium series is also a weird one because it's kind of like what the Godzilla movies are now, where they're kind of like almost anthology movies essentially. So it's not like you're going into the introduction of a series so much as like, here's another Godzilla movie. Have fun.
Yeah.
All of that said, do you think that Godzilla movie is going to be explaining how there's another Godzilla in 1999? Are they going to go this movie's route where it's just vague? Is it going to be Bowen's Godzilla coming back? Is it going to be a second Godzilla? What do you think they're going to be doing in that situation?
I do have a question, a clarifying question. You described Raid's, Return, and 2000 all as sequels to the original, correct?
Yeah. So the one thing that, yes. So the 1954 movie does exist in continuity with this 1999 movie.
That is important because I can't just say like, well, it's just the first Godzilla. It just shows up. I would say, okay, what have I said so far? My first prediction was that it's a different Godzilla. Bing. My second prediction was a supernatural, which is not quite right. I don't want to say the same thing again. I want to say something different. I'm going to say that Godzilla 2000, Godzilla is brought back via science. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I think Godzilla is going to be brought back via man and science.
Okay.
In a bizarre, twisted, you know, Jurassic Parky type of way. Not exactly Jurassic Park. That's not my official prediction, but like in that sort of sense, right? Like
the timing will work because it'll be after Jurassic Park exists, so it could be.
Yeah.
We're making a new Godzilla theme park, and we want to bring back Godzilla for it. Whoops! It all went badly.
Here's what ill-advised science is my official prediction for Godzilla 2000.
That does feel very like turn of the millennium,
doesn't it? I think it's a good prediction. I don't think you know, if that's not it, I think my guess was still very good.
Well, I mean, that was going to be the next question too. Like, you know, in the way that this movie was obviously updated for the 80s, like, how do you think this Godzilla movie will be different for being a movie in 1999 for the turn of the millennium?
Well, it's weird because the tough thing is that I do have the context of 1998. And I know that's a very different story, like, which is part of what I'm acknowledging, but you
can't forget that. I can't forget that it exists.
History, and I do think, you know, not that I would have predicted that 1998 is how you would reboot the story of Godzilla. But there are things about that where it just feels sort of like grounded and more blockbuster that I kind of would have predicted. I have to imagine this, or I guess modern blockbuster. I feel like I can't predict the same thing for that because they've happened like a year apart. And I feel like you would want something distinct. So, man, I'm not really sure. 2000.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it actually happened in 1999, though. The movie released in 1999. So the big thing that the world was worried about was like Y2K. So there has to be, I'm guessing there's some sort of like technological anxiety as some sort of theme in that movie. You know, if the 50s one is post World War II and the 80s one is Cold War, I'm guessing the 2000 one is some sort of technological anxiety because they're not going to get into like, you know, weird American politics, which is like my context for the 2000s.
Yeah. I think that's a really good prediction. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And then last question, you think any other kaiju are going to be in this movie?
I'm going to say yes. I feel like there's no way that all three, well, Raids is different. But I can't imagine that they're going to do 2 reboots in a row where there's no other kaiju. So I'm going to go wild and say that like this reboot has like more than one other monster. Who knows? Why not?
Cool. Okay.
Maybe it just introduces a Godzilla world where there just are monsters. You know?
Yeah. I love that. Godzilla wakes up on Godzilla Island and there's just tons of monsters. Yeah, I love that.
I know there's an island out there somewhere. I don't know about it. I don't know shit, but I know it's out there.
Oh, that's so fun. Man. All right. Well, cool. Well, this is great. I'm excited to start off the new year in the year 1999/2000.
Woo.
Well, if you'd like to find other queer creators to talk about media like we do here on Screonk, you should check out the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective at glitterjaw.com. You can follow that on Twitter, Facebook, and Blue Sky at Glitterjaw, and Instagram at glitterjawpods. But before we toss you into a volcano, Doug, where can people find you and everything you're working on?
Yeah, you can find me all over the place at Ikkybooley, ICKYBOOLEY. Speaking of Glitterjaw, you can find me on another podcast over there called Novel Gaming, where my co-host Katie and I get together and talk about all the games, books, and sometimes other media that we've been consuming lately. And of course, you and I have a sort of very long-running show on that in that collective called Walloping Web Snappers, where we do deep dives into every Spider-Man cartoon ever made. And I will say, it is a great time to follow Glitterjaw here sort of at the end of the year, because I feel like we are very excited for the year 2024. So if you're listening to this in real time, follow Glitterjaw, because I'm sure there will be some announcements at some point in the relative near future.
You will be hearing probably sooner rather than later about some potentially new shows that are coming out.
Yeah. But what about you, Derek?
Sure. Other than Walloping Web Snappers, you can find my podcast Gimmicks, which I do with my co-host David, where we explore the structure-breaking, experimental, high-concept, gimmicky episodes of television. And you can, of course, find that anywhere you get your podcasts and alongside Glitterjaw. You can also find my Twitch at Mr. Dare Bear, where I stream VHS recordings of old television airings with the original commercials. I would also point you to our Patreon if you'd like to support us. It is our Walloping Web Snappers Patreon, patreon.com/Walloping Web Snappers. Obviously, that's for our Spider-Man show, but all of the stuff Doug and I do together is supported by that. So if you want to support this show, that's a great place to go. We do plan to do some Godzilla related bonus episodes. I think we mentioned a few ideas. Timing for all that stuff is TBA, but you will see some of that in the near future. And honestly, if you just like this show and want to support us, that is a great way to do it. That would be very helpful. Also check out our Discord. Is again our Walloping Web Snappers Discord, but we do have a channel for Screonk, and it's a fun place to talk to people who listen to our shows. There's a link for that in the show notes. If you have any questions, feedback, or concerns, you can email us at screonkpodcast@gmail.com. We're a new podcast, so we would love it if you could rate, review, and of course subscribe on any and maybe all podcast platforms that you use or can use. And next month, like we said, we're moving on to the first film of the Millennium Era with 1999's Godzilla 2000 Millennium.
I can't wait. Bye.
So this is goodbye now, you dare to leave me. How would you go? I don't wanna cry, but the tears come freely. I miss you so. Somewhere in the